Everyone, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting regarding the airport. I just want to acknowledge that we're holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, in particular the Qualicum First Nation. So we do have an agenda. Are there any changes required to the agenda? Seeing none, then the agenda is adopted by consent, and we start off with the Qualicum Beach Airport Quality Report. Mr. Colford.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of the report tonight is to provide Council with an overview of airport-related matters that occurred in the third and fourth quarters of 2025. It's important to note that the November 17, 2025 was the date of cutoff point to allow for the agenda production of the report. So, Your Worship, I'd like to walk Council and the public through a series of slides. This is how we promoted the discussion forum for this evening. Purpose of the report, as I mentioned, is to provide Council an overview of airport-related matters. This year, on September the 10th, we did a annual live exercise, emergency training. Your Worship, this is turning out to be very successful. What we do is we bring in a company that provides a fuselage, and it allows emergency services along with airport staff, to train in the event that we have an emergency at the airport. Hangar construction. This year, Council approved 2 individual lease agreements for the purpose of constructing hangars. These 2 hangars are currently being constructed on Row B. And they will provide additional revenue for the airport. This is a picture of one of the hangars that's being constructed currently. Wesley Ridge Fire. On July the 31st, the Wesley Ridge Fire occurred. The town of Qualicum Beach Airport played a pivotal role during this arduous time. The airport provided the infield of up to 9 helicopter companies and their equipment. Fuel was available through the airport dispensing system, and staff were on hand to provide support. Because of its central location and proximity to the wildfire, the Qualicum Beach Airport was able to provide essential resources and support for this fire. This is a picture. This is Colson Aviation. This big unit here is what they call a 61. And the definition of that is because it was built in the early 60s. This helicopter was instrumental, and this is the one we often hear about that does night suppression for night vision. So the pilots, including an engineer, would have been flying this machine during that fire from approximately 3 p.m. in the afternoon to 3 a.m. in the evening. And as we've all seen in media clips and events, that they're finding that fire suppression in the evening is more successful because the temperatures of the day and the heat are at their lowest levels. So this was one of the machines that were at the airport. ACAP applications in 2024. The town applied for 2 grants through the ACAP Airport Capital Assistance Program. This was for the runway taxi, way and apron overlays, and a loader snowblower. In 2025, the town was notified that they were not approved for either of the grants. However, both grants now have been resubmitted. Transport Canada is in receipt of them, and we will be considered for 2026. The project will not proceed without successful grant applications. BC ACAP, this is another program, however, it's a provincial program. In March of 2025, staff applied for an airport master/business plan grant through the British Columbia Air Access Program with a value of $35,000. The town has been notified that they were not approved for the 2025 grant application. And staff have referred this grant application again to the 2027 strategic planning budget process for Council's consideration. Council's strategic initiatives. Council directed staff to investigate the viability of identifying if the communities of Qualicum Woods, the Evergreens, Aldous Road, Cottonwood Drive, Hemsworth Road, and Rupert Road could become recognized as noise-sensitive areas. Staff have consulted with NAV Canada on the viability of NSAs within these identified areas, and NAV Canada supports the recommended changes to the Canadian Flight Supplement as shown on the December the 3rd PowerPoint. This is another report that I'll be providing to Council this evening. Staff provided a report to Council at the October 22nd, 2025 regular Council meeting, and there was a motion to defer the report to the December 3rd meeting tonight of the Committee of the Whole, and that again is the report that I'll be presenting later. Council's strategic initiatives for 2025. As part of these Council strategic initiatives, Council directed staff to conduct a review of the airport establishment and operations bylaw. Staff have completed the bylaw review with the exception of terminal lease rates and provided a report at a special meeting of Council on November the 26th, 2025. Jurisdictional questions. The town sent a list of jurisdictional questions to Transport Canada, the judicial branch located in Ottawa, in December of 2024, and has received the following statement. Quote, unfortunately, after reviewing current priorities and workload within both the DOJ and Transport Canada's legal department, we will not be able to provide a legal opinion or direction on this matter at this time. Due to a significant increase in high priority and time-sensitive files, resources have been reallocated to address those demands, end quote. Ms. Varela will be speaking to that after my report. On January the 10th, 2024, staff met with representatives from Sealand Air and an engineering consultant retained by BC Hydro. The engineering consultant has since provided staff with a report that provides capital cost estimates and explores two options. Option 1 is estimated to be $1.8 million, and option 2 is estimated to be $1.1 million. Due to the high capital costs for Phase 3 power infrastructure and low demand for charging electric aircraft, staff are recommending that until electrification of aircraft in Canada becomes industry practice, Council take no action. However, alternatively, Council could provide direction to staff to take action. Helicopter training. From January to November, the airport manager has approved 23 days of helicopter training, approximately 20 hours of training at the Qualicum Beach Airport. The training was for air ambulance operations and occurred during daytime and nighttime hours. Air ambulance. BC Emergency Health Services has reported from January the 1st to May the 31st that there were 11 transfers from the airport. Unfortunately, staff reached out to BC Health Services, and to date we haven't been able to get further information from May to November. Community education. The Airport Authority continues to improve communications and education regarding best practices such as the Good Neighbor program, noise-sensitive areas, and noise abatement procedures. This is being done through verbal communications with local pilots, Qualicum Beach Flying Club, and Sealand Flight School. Letters have also been sent to flying schools and flying clubs on the Lower Mainland and the island. In 2025, the town of Qualicum Beach launched their new website, which includes an improved section for the Qualicum Beach Airport and provides easy access to information, including procedures. Your Worship, this is our public inquiry stats from June to November. There were 175 inputs from 35 residential addresses. 3 of them were actionable, 2 noise complaints, noise abatement procedure violations, and there was a curfew violation as well. And the rest, as you can see on that list, is the number of complaints, what type they are. For an example, 112, noise complaints related to flight paths. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. This is for council purposes. There's a recommendation at the top of the agenda to receive the quarterly report. Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Young, discussion. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, I do have some issues with some of the recommendations, and I'm not sure where the appropriate venue would be to discuss that.
We'll do that after we talk to them. Basically, get the rest of the presentations,
Okay.
and then we'll do the recommendations.
Okay, fair enough. I'll wait till then.
Thank you. See no further discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next presentation, Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this part of this evening's presentation relates to Airport Authority for CAT for the Qualicum Beach Airport. So as Mr. Goldfuss already mentioned, in December, a year ago, staff sent questions to Transport Canada for the Department of Justice to respond to. And we undertook this step because members of the public were reporting receiving conflicting information between what the town was provided through its approved Transport Canada channels and what the public had received from Transport Canada outside of these channels. So we really took this step to develop a common knowledge base. Unfortunately, as Mr. Goldfuss referred to, they've advised they are not able to provide a legal opinion or direction on this matter at this time because of their competing priorities and files. So as such, staff are once again providing a question and answer section that has been reviewed in consideration of relevant case law, that's really important, and operations at our airport. So the big picture, the federal government has exclusive jurisdiction over aeronautics, and this is considered well established in Canadian law. So for clarity, the town does not have the jurisdiction to regulate flight operations. Given this, a local government has limited ability to use its regulatory authority to influence flight operations in accordance with enabling legislation. So, for example, establishing airport hours of operation is actually within the town's sphere of influence. Many things are outside of that. And you'll have to forgive me, my slides usually don't have this much text in them, but because we wanted this to be a Q&A and we want to post this to the website for that common knowledge base, I put a lot more text in my slides than my usual style, so thank you for putting up with me. I think the other piece is that we have to recognize the town can use its corporate powers to influence operations in some ways, and these are through its relationships with tenants and lessees at the airport. So the questions we submitted is, can the Airport Authority, the town, enforce restrictions on aircraft operations by requiring certain routes be followed for takeoff and landing? So the answer is no. However, the Airport Authority, the town, can apply to Transport Canada to establish noise abatement procedures as a regulation, and we currently have this in place for turns to the north. A noise abatement procedure does not restrict pilots from flying a certain route. So for clarity, a noise abatement procedure is a procedure established by regulation. So for example, at CAT 4, if a pilot chooses to make a turn to the north, they must fly extended center of runway 2 nautical miles or 1,000 feet above sea level before a north turn can be completed. Another question, can the Airport Authority enforce restrictions on aircraft operations by requiring certain routes be followed for flights over the town of Qualicum Beach? The answer is no. However, while the Airport Authority cannot restrict the airspace over town, it can work with NAV Canada to publish a Visual Flight Rule Terminal Procedure Chart, the VTPC, in the Canadian Flight Supplement, and to establish noise-sensitive areas. Both of these are non-enforceable as they are not regulations, but Mr. Goldfuss is going to talk about both the VTPC and the expansion of noise-sensitive areas in his next presentation. Another question, can the Airport Authority enforce restrictions on aircraft operations by requiring certain routes over the town of Qualicum Beach be avoided? No. However, the town can work with NAV Canada to have noise-sensitive areas published in the Canadian Flight Supplement. These NSAs are not enforceable as they are not a regulation. Can the Airport Authority enforce restrictions on aircraft operations by prohibiting takeoffs and landings between specified hours for all aircraft? And this is a clear yes. The Airport Authority does have the ability to determine the airport's operational hours. So CAP 4 currently operates from 6 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, and that's 7 days a week, except in the case of an emergency or with the permission of the airport manager. Another question that we asked was, can the Airport Authority enforce restrictions on aircraft operations by preventing or regulating the hours and days of operation of flight training, such as takeoffs and landings, separate and apart from the operating hours of the airport? And this has a yes and no answer. So yes, the town can for flight schools based in Qualicum Beach, again, using those corporate powers. No, we cannot for flight schools not based in Qualicum Beach. So again, just to reiterate, we can regulate hours and days through contractual powers. We cannot restrict the use of the airport by flight schools operating out of other airports, because that clearly intrudes into this federal sphere of authority. What we can do is we can send out letters advising people of, and Mr. Goldfuss had already mentioned that, sent letters to flying schools located both on the mainland and other parts of the island, letting them know about the sensitivities around Qualicum Beach. Can the Airport Authority enforce restrictions on aircraft operations by prohibiting specific types of aircraft from using the airport? And this answer was a little gray. It's unlikely. It's unlikely the town could refuse to allow landing and takeoff by an airplane that is permitted to use the airfield under federal regulations. However, if council wished to pursue this action, it would require consultation with Transport Canada to determine if such a restriction is lawful. Importantly, this action may not be undertaken by the town unilaterally. Another question that we asked in association with that question was, if yes, we could do it, what are the process or tools available to the town to achieve possible restrictions? And the answer again is, if the town wishes to attempt this, it will require making application to Transport Canada. People also ask the question, well, what complementary senior government process or tools are available to Transport Canada and NAV Canada to achieve possible restrictions on that question? And we come back saying, if the town wishes to attempt this, it will have to be done by making application to Transport Canada, and then Transport Canada would then direct the next steps, the process, and available tools. It's likely the process would be amendments to the federal aeronautical information publications, such as the Canadian Flight Supplement that we continually referred to in this presentation. The public also had questions about aircraft noise. So are there specifications for aircraft noise levels? And the response is not that the Airport Authority or the town is aware of. And then if yes, what organization authority would undertake enforcement, and how would these restrictions be enforced? Again, we're unsure, but we are sure about the fact that the Airport Authority cannot regulate aircraft noise levels. Flight schools, a lot of discussion around this. So can the town decline or restrict flight schools not based at Qualicum Beach Airport from using the airport? The answer is no. Can the town make a bylaw or policy decision to decline flight schools from being based at and operating out of the Qualicum Beach Airport? The answer is no. Another question that was asked by the public is, what is the extent to which the Airport Authority can regulate the operation of aircraft under the town's authority to make business decisions? So this is where I think some of that nuance came into the questions that were asked outside of the approved Transport Canada channels by the public. So it's very clear that we cannot use our business regulation powers to attempt to regulate flight operations at the airport beyond very limited scope, such as setting those hours of operation. However, we can use our corporate powers to influence operations through leases at the airport. So again, that relationship with lessees or tenants. And the question of a bylaw. So the town cannot pass a bylaw prohibiting flight schools to be based at or operating out of the Qualicum Beach Airport. Another question was, when providing answers such as those that went before, does Transport Canada consider case law in addition to Transport Canada regulations, as case law influences the airport authority's decision-making and understanding of its scope of authority in relation to the Aeronautics Act? And we can't really answer that on Transport Canada's behalf, but what we can say is the answers provided by the town in this presentation have considered case law. Another question the public asked was, can the Airport Authority publish a noise-sensitive area map in the Canadian Flight Supplement that conflicts with noise abatement procedures or that contains areas located within the extended flight path? So we know the Airport Authority can work with NAV Canada to publish noise-sensitive areas in the Canadian Flight Supplement, and that NSAs can be published over an area that has a noise abatement procedure. We also know NAV Canada does not support the establishment of noise-sensitive areas within a flight path. Another question the public asked was, as Transport Canada requires pilot training to maintain accreditation for some operations, and if pilots don't take their required flight training at CAT 4, the Qualicum Beach Airport, does this affect their ability to fly into our airport, particularly for medevac night flights? So it is the town's understanding that flight training does not require that it be taken at a certain airport or within a certain airspace. Pilots that are flying into CAT 4 must adhere to federal regulations. It seems reasonable to think that it would be easier if they were familiar with the airport, but I don't think it's a requirement. I think it's important for the public and council to understand that we continue to receive requests for restrictions on flight operations that are outside of our authority. So we continue to see requests for restriction or prohibition of circuit training over populated areas. We continue to see requests for prohibition of all helicopter training over populated areas. Important to understand, neither of these requests are within the Airport Authority's sphere of influence. The town has undertaken, however, significant efforts to mitigate noise concerns associated with the airport over the last couple of years. And I think this biannual committee of the whole, with the great attendance that we see, really reinforces that this is a positive outcome. There's a lot of pieces still coming in from the public. And I'd just like to touch on a few of those that we've been provided. So a lot of people continue to refer to this sign that I think was removed about 10 years ago. Again, it predates me, so I'm going to say approximately 10 years ago. And this is what people refer to as the old flight path. Transport Canada actually mandated that this sign be removed, because when you start to see instructions about climbing heading 252 degrees, you're into the territory of regulation, which is federal authority. So they made us take this sign down. We've also been provided this text, which looks to be from the Canadian Flight Supplement. About 9 years ago, this was replaced. And if you take a look at the pink area, it says right-hand circuits runway 11, and then you've got a regulation behind that. Below it in yellow is a separate item, which is the noise abatement procedure. However, 9 years ago, this was not established as a regulation, and we can tell that because there is not a regulation number behind it. So you can see that. I'm not sure if I can. So there is a regulation, the car, and there is no car behind that noise abatement procedure. So I think the public is saying, well, if we could have a noise abatement procedure like this before, why can't we have it now? If we look at the current Canadian Flight Supplement, you're going to see a different structure here. So again, it still refers to right-hand circuits, still the same regulation number. But down here where we see noise abatement procedures, this now has a regulation number. So that's a very distinct and important difference. Previous slide, no regulation behind that noise abatement procedure. Current CFS, we see a regulation. We're also seeing suggestions for new noise abatement procedures. So this one would propose from the public a new noise abatement procedure that instead of our 1,000 feet above sea level or 2 nautical miles out, we would see a turn close to the end of the runway that had people going this way and then peeling off, if you will. Staff anticipate this proposal is not workable as a regulation, and there's a lot of detail to why. However, if Council wishes staff to pursue such a proposal with Transport Canada, I would like to point out it's likely considered a new noise abatement procedure, which would be for turns to the south, because this is our existing. So this seems like it would be a new noise abatement procedure. And staff would see this being directed to next year's strategic planning session. And Mr. Goldfuss is going to present on the expanded noise-sensitive areas and the establishment of the VTPC for circuit training in his next presentation. So referring this idea, if Council wished to pursue it, to next year's strategic planning would also give you a year's time to see if those other measures that are being proposed would have effect. The other challenge with this proposal that I see is that NAV Canada does not support noise-sensitive areas within a flight path. So you will see this whole area being proposed as a noise-sensitive area. We've also been provided for members of the public information about the Courtenay Air Park. And it's important to note that the Courtenay Air Park is a very different operation than we have. So it's a registered airfield, but we're a certified airport here in Qualicum Beach. So that is important to understand. And the Courtenay Air Park CFS, the Canadian Flight Supplement, states touch and go PPR, and PPR stands for prior permission required. So we don't see it as a regulation in their CFS. Again, there's no regulatory number behind it, but staff are investigating. We have reached out to our contact channels at Transport Canada to understand what are the implications. Is this lawful for Qualicum Beach to do? And then we can have the discussion if it is, that is this something Council wants to consider? Because I'm sure there's also enforcement or just operational impacts that Council would want to consider. And so that's really provided for the purpose of attempting to consider establishing that common knowledge base. And I'm just wondering if Council has any questions or wish to provide any direction to staff at this time. If you don't, Your Worship, we would anticipate Council just receiving the presentation for information.
Yes, thank you for that very detailed question and answer presentation. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, so just one question just off the top. So previously, we moved the lights essentially back further towards Rupert Road because the trees have been growing to such a height that we needed to do that in order to make sure that there was actually a safe landing area. My understanding is the trees were being addressed or have been addressed. So has there been any thought of actually moving lights back to where they were previously, just through the chair to staff?
Thank you. Mr. Goldfuss?
Thank you, Your Worship. To Councillor Harrison's question, yes, so I can report that through the obstacle survey, there was a number of trees that were identified in 2022. Those trees now have been successfully removed. However, the threshold that you're speaking of, Councillor Harrison, is still displaced, and it was displaced approximately 50 feet. What we are waiting for, and this is based on economies of scale, is that the airport functions just fine with that displacement. But if we are successful with our grant application to have the runway repaved, that would include line painting as well. So on the basis of economies of scale, we would like to see as staff to see if we're successful in that grant application for 2026. And if we are, the pavement will be done and the line painting will be done. And at that time, what we'll do is we'll put the threshold back to its original position.
Okay, and the reason I was asking is when I spoke to staff at Square Air, which is the carrier operating out of the airport, they did mention that the angle essentially a plane has to take to make that shortened runway does have an operational impact on their maintenance costs. Now, I'm not an expert on that. I'm not the person to say it is or it doesn't, but I do think it's worthwhile following up on that on their side, because if something we're doing is creating more maintenance costs, essentially is what it is because you're landing with more force, then it's probably good to know if this is something that might jeopardize the operations of any carrier, whether it's Esquire or any other carrier. They're all taking that same angle. It's a little bit steeper, and it results in higher operating costs. It's just a good thing for us to think about. Beyond that, the broader point I would have for the presentations is that I'm not sure I agree with the staff discussion about electrification of the airport. This is something that's happening already in aeronautics more broadly. We had a demonstration flight. I saw the owner of Sealand a moment ago who gave a demonstration, and I thought the propeller noise was going to be potato, potato, propeller, propeller, so it's going to be every bit as loud anyways. And I was completely wrong. It was vastly quieter. And I do think this is something where instead of looking at raising fees and creating issues, for example, if you raise the fees for the flight school at Sealand, they have a sublease with the flying club. The sublease that they're paying allows the flying club to operate altogether. So if they decide to pull their operations to another jurisdiction, because we're raising fees for flight schools, then you could actually be accidentally killing the flying club, just as one proviso. The other thing is that since they're already trying to do electric aviation out of Campbell River, this is where I think we should be incentivizing. There was, just for staff's benefit, I'll send them a link to it later on, but I have a subscription to the New York Times as one of my presents for myself every Christmas. And September of 2025, there's an article about Norway. And so Norway basically has heavily incentivized electric vehicles and then also electric aviation. So it started with electric vehicles. Right now, last year, I think, this is maybe more for Councillor Skipsey, I think it was 89% of all cars bought last year were electrics. And that's, again, because they heavily subsidize it. So it's transferring over to aviation, where there's an increasing amount of electric planes being purchased. And with Qualicum Beach's location, forgive me, I think staff did a presentation like 2.5 years ago, and I'm trying to remember which date it was exactly. It's been a while. There's been a lot of presentations on this. But if you look at all the small airports, we're sort of at the center. Like, it's almost like a semicircle around us, from Campbell River, Port Alberni, to the south too, which is, we would be the perfect location for a servicing center for electric aircraft, because it's the same small flight distance in every direction. And then if we're pushing for electric, that also addresses the noise complaints that a lot of citizens have, and creates business opportunities. And the last thing, too, is that it's not just for aviation if we consider electricity at the airport. In the previous term, we had an application for wood manufacturing at the airport, which ran into issues with the province for reasons we could not fathom, but it did. But there's a variety of uses where a future council might want to look at. So our current OCP, I guess, we haven't officially adopted the new OCP, but talks about things like South Airport lands, potential for solar panel manufacturing, and some other issues. All those things would require three-phase power. So it's also not just about aviation, it's also opening up that South Airport land to have industrial uses, pays a much higher rate of taxes, then we don't have to subsidize the airport as much. We might have to buy the land from the province, which is a little, very expensive proviso. But I'm not sure that we should proceed per se, but I am hesitant to say no, because once businesses sort out where the service hub is going to be for electric aviation, where the main airports that do that are set up, they might not replicate those costs in other airports. So my fear would be that Nanaimo or Comox or Campbell River gets all the electric training schools. We're stuck with the internal combustion ones because we didn't adapt soon enough. And then everyone's stuck in a holding pattern where there's a lot of friction, where I think most folks, if it was quieter, I think most folks would be fine with the flying schools. I don't think it's the fact that there's a plane over their house. I think it's the volume for most folks. If I'm wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I just be cautious about that. I know we're in a tight budgetary environment, but I do think that there's an opportunity here where we would do well to reach out to the province. They had a Clean BC program, which was all about investments in clean technology. And there might be opportunities for grants. I know they're trying to wrap up Clean BC and modify it, but this for me would be something that the province would do well to support. When I went to the Affordable Housing Conference, there's a gentleman who's actually in the audience today, but I was sitting beside a pilot the whole way there, and he just come back from California, where he has two hats he wears. And he said how in California this is ubiquitous now. This is the new normal. So I do think when we were looking at one report I was reading said that there's an annual reduction in battery weight and also essentially the capacity, how much juice is in the battery. I do think we are going to be transitioning for short distance aviation to electric, and this is actually our niche in Qualicum Beach. This is what we do. Our runway is too short for long distance aircraft, and it always will be. So yeah, I'd just be cautious about that. I'm not saying we do anything, because obviously we don't have much money, but I would be very curious to see if there's opportunities where, you know, we meet Stephanie Higginson once in a blue moon. It might be good to talk to her staff about, are there opportunities with Clean BC to maybe get some of the funding for three-phase at the airport funded, and then that opens up not just electric aviation, but also other light industrial uses, which aligns with our OCP and could potentially generate revenue. Sorry, Ms. Varela, now you can correct me if I'm mistaken on anything. My apologies.
No,
that was a long no. You know, we went at the UBCM conference, and Mr. Farnworth was there. I think we all heard him say that we don't have money in the coffers in British Columbia, maybe enough for a light switch. So I remember that's what he said. So I think we may have to take a while before they fill their coffers, but it's definitely the way to go. I think if we can have some kind of three-phase power for people to charge their plane, not that there are many planes in Qualicum Beach, owned by people in Qualicum Beach, but modification to have an electric engine, electric motor, but eventually that will come. But if you want to make a notice of motion for a future council meeting to steer us in that direction, you're welcome to it, Mr. Harris, Councilor Harrison.
I would suggest I'd probably be better served talking with either Mr. Goldfuss or other staff before doing anything.
Okay.
Because this is something where I don't want to wing it.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't mean to want to ring it, but I said we want to prepare a notice of motion in the future.
No, I think a future meeting, but it's also too, just to see, like I'll do some research on my own,
Yeah.
on my own time and see what programs are actually available. Because there are some things, again, I was just at an affordable housing conference. This is an NDP government. They were very aggressive in supporting that. The keynote speech was the Minister of Housing. No real new funding programs, to your point. So I think there's a lot of work to be done before we really start saying what staff should do.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I would note for council, you know, those are big price tags that are associated with the two options, 1.8 and 1.1, both of those with change. However, council could, as we move through the capital budget in the new year, consider putting something in that was grant dependent. So again, that's a discussion that can be had with staff going forward. Again, the information's only provided for council's information today. You're not making a decision. It is signal that you could potentially make a decision through the upcoming budget process, however.
Thank you. And that concludes your presentation. And next is back to Mr. Goldfuss. Sorry, Ms. Svensson?
Yes, sorry, Mayor Westbrook. May we get a motion to receive Ms. Varela's report for information so we can post it to the website?
Sure.
Thank you.
Councilor Skipsey, Councilor Van der Valk. Any discussion? Councilor Harrison.
Just, and there's one last point I forgot to mention. The key thing when we got our legal review, for me at least, as the takeaway, was that if folks have a lease with the town, we have much more authority over their operations. And so when we're looking at things, we might want to think about how do we maintain folks who have a good reputation, as opposed to create a situation where you have folks coming from out of town and maybe we have less ability to tell them to please not do that. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. So any further discussion? Councilor Young.
Curiosity, how long does it take for installation of getting electrification? And we're talking about it, but is it something that we can do right away if there seems to be a demand for it? Because we would like to be able to receive that and do that because it's better on the noise level, right?
I think it's a matter of cost. You saw the two prices? Yeah, we don't have that. Ms. Varela?
So again, I think I'll flag this for Director Hare when he's back in the office. Council may wish to consider this during capital budget discussions, and that we could look for potential grant funding for it. So that way it does remain, you know, on the books, if you will, without actually impacting taxation at this time.
Thank you. So I'm sure Councilor Young will second the motion. Thank you. So any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. Thank you, Ms. Varela. So I think Mr. Goldfuss isn't back in the lineup. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this NETS report was originally provided to Council on October the 22nd of 2025, and Council requested the item be brought forward to a future meeting. As such, the report is once again before Council for decision-making. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with additional information following a request from the President of the Qualicum Woods Residents Association regarding additional NSAs for Aldous Road, Cottonwood Drive, and Hemsworth Road. In addition, Council is provided with information following a staff discussion with NAV Canada that included adding Aldous Road, Cottonwood Drive, Hemsworth Road, and expanding Rupert Road as NSAs. I have a presentation that I would like to present.
Sure, proceed.
So again, the background here is the public has advocated for noise-sensitive areas, and they are Qualicum Woods, the Evergreens, Aldous Road, Cottonwood Drive, and Hemsworth Road, and Rupert Road. Council, through strategic initiative, directed staff to investigate. We have done that. This is the public proposal that we received on NSAs, and as Ms. Varela alluded to in her previous slides, what you can see here is the proposal is for this large NSA right there is directly in the flight path. NAV Canada does not support NSAs within a flight path. What is an NSA? NSAs are a tool that can be used to address noise exposure concerns. It's important to note that NSAs are not enforceable, they're not a regulation, and NSAs are not typically located within flight paths at the end of runways. What are the challenges? Some publicly proposed NSA areas are within the flight path at the end of the runway. NSAs are confusing for pilots if they are in a flight path, if they're at the end of the runway. The public may expect enforcement even though NSAs are not enforceable. However, there are some solutions. What if we can couple expanded noise-sensitive areas with a visual flight rules terminal procedure chart, better known as a VTPC, in the Canadian Flight Supplement for Qualicum Beach, while maintaining a clear flight path? NAV Canada supports this approach. What is a visual flight rules terminal procedure chart? A VPTC is a specialized chart within the CFS that provides detailed visual flight rules guidance for navigating specific areas. It does not apply to instrument flight rules. Many airports have adopted the use of VTPC, such as Squamish. A VTPC is viewed as a recommendation like NSAs, and although published in the CFS, it is not enforceable. And remember, it will not have that CARS regulation in brackets behind it. While not enforceable, VTPC provides clear guidance to pilots. Your Worship, this is an example of Squamish. So as you can see here, they actually have two. Oops, sorry. They actually have two at Squamish, one here and one here. And you can see here that these are noise-sensitive areas. So the purpose of a VTPC, as you can see, is to attempt to avoid these noise-sensitive areas. This is staff's recommendation as per your report, Appendix 1. Although this is a Google Map overlay, and if Council supports this, it will look like that when it's done. But this is staff's Google overlay of what staff is proposing. So what we can see here is this area here. This includes Aldous, Hemsworth area. This is a proposal to expand on the north side, these areas in blue. These yellow areas, I'd like to mention, they're existing, they're current NSAs here. So what staff is proposing is expanding on the north side of your airport runway, these areas that would bring you basically from the shoreline all the way down to a property on Hodges Road on the north side. This new noise-sensitive area as well. Hemsworth Drive, Cottonwood Drive, and Aldous Road. And expand this area of Rupert Road, okay? This area here is your VTPC that staff is proposing. So as you can see here, for circuits to the south, aircraft would depart the runway and they would follow the recommended route here, and they'd go around, avoiding this area of Rupert Road, which is the up-and-coming area of the new Pheasant Glen subdivision as well, I would like to add. So this VTPC actually would avoid these densely populated areas, which is here, in here, this section in here. It's kind of like an improved Good Neighbor program. But the benefits of this, Your Worship, is we can publish a VTPC in the Canadian Flight Supplement. We cannot publish the Good Neighbor program. And pilots, the other benefit to this is that pilots completely understand what a VTPC is and NSAs. They're very familiar with this process and these procedures. Staff have reached out to Pheasant Glen in a conversation and explained the proposed VTPC. Pheasant Glen is satisfied that the proposed VTPC is not going over the new Pheasant Glen subdivision. Recommendations. The Council directs staff to make an application to NAV Canada to create a visual flight rules terminal procedures chart in the Qualicum Beach Cat 4 Canadian Flight Supplement entry to include recommended circuit procedures as shown on Appendix 1 of this staff report, dated December the 3rd, 2025. And that further, that Council directs staff to make an application to NAV Canada to create new, additional noise-sensitive areas in the Qualicum Beach Cat 4 Canadian Flight Supplement entry to include recommended noise-sensitive areas as shown on Appendix 1 of the staff report dated December the 3rd, 2025. And further, that Council directs staff to only investigate inquiries, complaints related to noise abatement procedure and curfew violations at the airport, given the airport authorities' inability to enforce NSAs. Next steps. If Council approves and adopts VTPC procedures for the Qualicum Beach Airport, and if Council approves and adopts the staff proposed additional NSAs, staff will continue working with NAV Canada to implement. Until published in the CFS, the existing information will be in effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldfuss. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just point out that the third resolution, and further that Council directs staff to only investigate inquiries, complaints related to noise abatement procedure and curfew violations at the airport, given the airport authorities' inability to enforce NSAs. We already have a resolution very similar to that on the books that Council has directed us, but we thought it was important, again, to bring it back and connect it to the instruction to go advance NSAs, if that's the way Council actually chooses. So again, reminding both Council and the public that these pieces are not enforceable. So it almost serves as more of a reminder, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was your final presentation, and Mr. Goldfuss as well? Thank you. So for Council, we have on our agenda page, there's motions that we need to rescind. Can we bring that up? Yeah, at the top. So we'll require a motion to rescind those. And if we agree with what the recommendations were based on the presentation that we just saw, then we can make those motions. But I think it would be a good time at this point to invite the public if they have any comments on this or anything else. So I've got the speakers list, and I'll go down that list. First on the top is Terence Tobin.
Thank you again to the Mayor, Council, and the CAO and Airport Manager for their ongoing willingness to listen to residents' concerns about airport noise, and for initiating work on defining new noise-sensitive areas and the VTPC. There are two topics I'll cover briefly today. The first thing I want to talk about is public misconceptions versus reality. It's become clear that many community members and airport users have an unfortunate misconception. This narrative can be found in social media posts and in a recent online petition. I urge Council to note that a large percentage of the participants are not Qualicum Beach residents, and of those that are, many do not live near the airport's flight paths. The belief being expressed by many of these folks is that only a very few Qualicum Beach residents are complaining about airport noise, and that this small group wants to shut down the airport. This perception is completely false. First, we are more than a few people. The 89 validated petition signatures often cited are only a fraction of residents concerned about airport noise. And by the way, that petition continues to grow much larger. You need to add to that number the many hundreds of residents who responded to the town's airport survey and voiced concerns, and the many more who have done so at these meetings. Second, shutting down the airport has never been a stated goal. I need to repeat that. Shutting down the airport has never been a stated goal. In fact, I personally recognize the benefit of having a local airport for all its services. The existence and importance of the airport are not the issue and never have been. Those residents I have met with simply want to work in collaboration with the town and with pilots to help reduce airport noise impacts. We want pilots and other airport users to understand that we are not your adversaries. We want to be partners in finding a solution. And we believe we now have a workable solution that will be a win-win for everyone. Our recommendation to address noise concerns, as repeatedly voiced in previous meetings, the current noise abatement procedure adopted in 2016 has been ineffective in abating noise for many residents in high-density neighborhoods. The Good Neighbor program has helped, and we thank the pilots who have followed it, but being voluntary, it has only been partially successful. Ongoing complaints to the towns testify the noise problem has not gone away. A group of affected residents from multiple noise-sensitive areas has considered the needs of pilots and residents and proposes that the NAP be amended. We recommend a new flight path based on what was previously specified in the Canadian Flight Supplement before 2016. And I provided that map to you, and we saw it earlier up on the projection, which was great. We believe this revised NEP will deliver 4 benefits to pilots, to residents, and the town. First, this is a flight path that most pilots were already using before the current NEP was adopted, so they will be familiar with it. This flight path improves on the Good Neighbor program and the proposed VTPC. This flight path will avoid all established and expanded noise-sensitive areas, including along Rupert Road and the new Pheasant Glen development. This flight path is similar to the route Sealand pilots choose to use today for training, which has been proven successful in reducing noise impacts and complaints. As the map illustrates, when departing northwest from runway 29, the amended NAP route will require pilots to turn south before the railway tracks, then maintain a straight course west for at least 1.5 nautical miles and reach an altitude of at least 1,500 feet before turning north or south. So just an additional note, the VTPC looks like it's asking pilots to turn south. If they hit 1,500 feet, they can turn north or south. It won't bother anybody. As the map, this amended NAP will minimize noise over all NSAs as well as the downtown core. To be most effective, this NEP should apply to aircraft flying by visual flight rules, VFR, as well as instrument flight rules, IFR, if possible. It should also apply to all fixed-wing and helicopter training in and around the airport to help avoid residential areas. Most importantly, this amended NEP will be enforceable and therefore far more effective at reducing noise than the voluntary Good Neighbor program or, in fact, the VTPC. and it would be a route that pilots are already familiar with and should not be inconvenienced by. As previously confirmed by Transport Canada administrators, the town and airport manager have the power to initiate this type of revision to the NAP and NSAs and to have all of this included in the Canadian Flight Supplement. There is no need for the town to wait for a response from Transport Canada Legal Department, which was addressed earlier. We therefore strongly recommend that work on these changes commenced as soon as possible. Thank you for your consideration of this recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Tobin. I also want to acknowledge the respectful tone and deal with the facts, and also for the gallery to be respectful. I know people sometimes disagree with whoever is speaking, but as chair, I insist that we do not interrupt anybody speaking or any hollering or booing or anything else. So let's keep this very respectful, and the tone was set very well by Mr. Tobin. Next is John Leo.
I'm going to be a little bit ad-lib at first. I would go with your BTPC, would alleviate problems where I live. Yeah, and I know I was going to start speaking, but I just want to show you something so it sinks in. A few bad apple pilots can ruin it for everybody, and I don't have a problem with local pilots coming and going. That's a picture of my house, the blue dot. That's excessive, okay? And this is the same day, at the same time, with another. That's Vital Aviation, a training school. Okay, at the same time, there are also 2 more planes flying that day that were not on the transponders. So we had a plane flying over our house every 2 minutes, and some of them are under 500 feet, and I know how to judge distance. Okay, so that's excessive. This is the next day, same guy, excessive. In my opinion, you can't even have a conversation. And yes, you can do a PPR in like Squamish has done as well, and probably other airports. Now, and at a heading on top of this PPR for Comox, it says, and I'm gonna get my glasses on, getting old. And Courtney highlights that touch and go, a major factor in quality of life disturbances here, are only permitted with prior airport approval. Okay, so that removes a lot. Okay, now I'll get to my little thing here. We have lived on our property for 31 years and never once complained about aircraft noise. My son is a helicopter pilot with 23 years experience and also has his fixed-wing license. I have no issues with scheduled flights, medevacs, search and rescue, local pilots coming and going, and helicopters, including firefighting helicopters, doing their jobs day and night, protecting all of us. The noise from circuit training this year was the worst I've ever experienced, especially on nice days when we want to be outside. Sometimes up to 4 planes are flying over us every 2 minutes to make it impossible to have a conversation, and I have video to prove it. Sometimes planes are 500 feet and less over my house. The majorities of pilots circuit training are not Qualicum Beach taxpayers, and the one example, multiple passes over mine and my neighbor's house, is a Hornby Island resident. It appears they are using my house as a gigantic pylon to do circuits around. And when Pheasant Glen development gets done, they will be going over another 183 residents. We are not on the flight path, and the circuit training is interfering with my right to enjoy my property. We have spoken to people who say they will leave here because of the noise, and others who have been visiting here who will not consider moving here because of the noise. The aircraft noise is devaluing our properties. The Qualicum Beach taxpayers get nothing out of circuit training but noise and lead pollution. I suggest prohibiting circuit training at Qualicum Beach Airport, like Courtney Airport and other airports. It is a 20 to 25-minute flight to Campbell River Airport, which is surrounded by forest land where they can do their circuit training. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leo. You can leave those drawings with Ms. Svensson if you like. And next is Dorothy Leo.
My husband and I purchased our current property 31 years ago before Rupert Road was, other than a potholed one-lane dirt road that had a total of 3 households fronting on it. We farm our ALR designated 5-acre minimum property and have had a horse boarding facility, including a 17,000 square foot combination indoor riding arena and barn for the past 24 years. At the time we bought, we wanted to build the home of our dreams, and I wanted to bring my horse home for a boarding facility to be kept and cared for by us. I did call the town prior to our purchase. There was no mention of any planned changes at the time to the current airport uses or operations. I do have a longtime neighbor who has lived in the area since 1989 and who made similar inquiries in June of that year regarding, and who made similar, the town's plans for the airport. She was told most specifically the town's plans was told most specifically that 1, no helicopters, 2, noisy, 2, dawn to dusk operations only, no runway lights, and 3, no ultralights, too noisy and too slow. I mention this by way of emphasizing that even when one does their due diligence before making a significant purchase, it doesn't mean that one will be given an accurate information or that which withstands the test of time. After we built our home and a small barn for our horse, we began to explore possible usages for our designated agricultural land. We asked the town for permission to put in a small nursery, but we were denied. We were told we would be competing with Whiskey Creek Nursery, which was located on 2nd Street in the town, but it did not, in fact, grow the products it sold on site. We decided to build a horse boarding business, and we created a 5-acre hayfield to supplement the endeavor. We built our facility in large part with our own hands, and the work involved in that, as well as ongoing maintenance, is enormous. This year, specific operations at the airport, namely touch and goes, have impacted our lives in ways that, although others of our neighbors had mentioned such, have never occurred to us before. These touch and goes frequently involve pilots from elsewhere, not those who reside within the town, and to add insult to injury, most are not charged for availing themselves on our airport. They often fly at alarmingly low altitudes, far beyond the recommended for any flights over agricultural areas, and perform tight circuits that bring them repeatedly over our properties, sometimes as frequently as in 2-minute intervals for hours on end. This practice places people who are using their properties as and for which said properties are zoned willfully and intentionally at risk, not only mentally but physically, as large animals cannot merely be instructed not to react to such unpredictable and alarming assaults on their senses and their perceived sense of safety. All of us living on ALR designated properties have a right to enjoy and utilize our properties consistent with that long-standing zoning and its attended livestock-friendly designation. And yet said use is being directly impacted, threatened, and rendered physically hazardous by these touch and goes that are known to be such intrusive noise generators that other airfields have actually severely limited them or even banned them outright. I would like to respond to the Change.org petition that has been the subject of far too much ink, giving it illegitimacy as a serious document, no addresses, and its inception by a resident of the RDN, not the town of Qualicum Beach. This individual contributes nothing through property taxes for funding for airport operations, and ironically lives in an area previously designated noise sensitive, a privilege that she is apparently anxious to deny to others. I suggest discussions regarding airport operations, costs, etc., be addressed first to those who fund the airport with their taxes and reside within the town as town voters. I would think that those involved in town governance would be most responsive to those who elected them and pay their salaries. Sadly, this appears to not always be the case. In one very recent comment on social media, Councillor Harrison referred to the Overton window, implying that those being distressed and harassed by the touch and go should be considered wild-eyed extremists advocating for the complete closure of the airport in spite of his offering no evidence.
Sorry, point of order. A, it's not what I said, and B, we're not actually calling people out in this session.
It's not good for us to get targeted when we can't respond. It was just your presentation. So you
But
can.
this is what he said.
Well, you can write it to us, but I would prefer if you send it to us in writing and make sure it's accurate. 'Cause
Okay.
You're accusing a member of council that I can't confirm, but if you put it in writing and tell me where the source is, then we
Okay.
can look into it.
So this is a gross misrepresentation unworthy of a supposedly responsible elected official. I would request that Mr. Harrison lay out in detail the negative consequences
No,
to the
Miss, sorry.
community.
Sorry, I'm asking for you to send the town a letter and I'm making those allegations clear on paper, and we can confirm if that's exactly what a councillor has said or not. So not hearsay, I need to see it in writing to be able to confirm that. Thank you. Next is Sue Willis.
Perfect. That'll be low enough? Yeah? Okay. Mayor Westbrook, council members, CAO Varela, staff, and residents of Qualicum Beach. My name is Sue Willis. At the last meeting, I talked about how the Qualicum Beach is unique in that, unlike most airports in BC, it's extremely close to the town. When I said this, it was met with some pushback. I'd like to invite anyone at this meeting to do your own research at this point. You can visit the airports or simply look at Google Maps and you'll clearly see that most small airports are either parallel to a town or outside of the town. And this is not to say that there are no other airports that are close to a town. There are, but there are only a few of them. And with those that are close to the town, the airport operators understand that there needs to be some cooperation by the airport management and pilots to enable the airport to coexist with the community. Steps that other towns have taken, and then, I mean, after listening to Dio Varela, I was hearing that maybe they're not within your jurisdiction, but I'll just mention what I've got here. So steps that other towns have taken are supporting a noise abatement committee. So this would include airport users, management, and residents. Prohibiting circuits over residences. I know like Fort Langley, other airports have done that. Requiring prior approval was mentioned before performing circuits. Airport management doesn't have to approve helicopter training. And also designating noise-sensitive areas, which it looks like we're looking into, which is very nice, thank you. This last option, it's a good step. Unfortunately, as we know, it's not enforceable, but it is a good step, and we thank you for that. So I once again ask the town to take this into account, that we are a unique airport because of the proximity to the town when making decisions about the airport. And for the town and the airport to coexist, which we are all trying to do, it just makes sense that some concessions need to be considered. Now, I have the same maps as John did. I'm in that same flight path, and this is just a time frame of 2 hours, and at the same time, another guy's going over. Like, it is incessant, and I've been hearing a lot of chatter about us being whiners and complainers, and we shouldn't have bought there, but honestly, it is a lot of airport traffic, and we have to stop our conversation, and as all the council members and maybe the staff are aware, I'm put in danger with my horses. I have been injured 3 times. So I'm not just talking about the odd plane that flies over. I'm not talking about emergency services. I'm talking about incessant flights over our home. So our area is a little bit different from the rest of the town in that we are acreages. So it's not just me, because up until now, I think that it's just been me complaining on behalf of the acreages in Rupert Road. But as it turns out, a lot of my neighbors are upset too. So this is a joint letter signed by 15 of us that I would like to present, and I'll read it on behalf. Dear Mayor Westbrook, council members, VAO, Varela, and staff. We, pardon me, the undersigned, would like to bring to your attention the fact that the Good Neighbor program, as it currently stands, has negatively affected our quality of life and safety. As owners of acreages and those living in the Rupert Road East, Garden Road East, View Road, Qualicum Road area, you could refer to all that as East Qualicum Beach. Sorry. We live in the only area in Qualicum Beach that is farmland and in the ALR. Our properties were originally referred to as residential estate properties. Many of us have large animals or livestock, horses, llamas, goats, sheep, and we are using our properties as it was zoned and intended. Since the town instilled the Good Neighbor program over a year ago, we have noticed an enormous increase in air traffic over our properties, as I have shown you. When we moved in 5 years ago, this was not the case. We didn't mind the odd airplane. We understand that the Good Neighbor program was put in place to help with the noise issues over the Qualicum Woods area, and we appreciate council's attempt to better that situation, because we really wouldn't want it over us either. We don't. There is, however, a problem with the program. The problem is that the GMP reroutes the planes over our acreages as the pilots are turning south, which appears to me to be too early in an attempt to avoid the Qualicum Woods area. Now, hopefully with the new noise-sensitive area, it might take them around. Again, it's not enforceable. So, we do not wish for the noise to be pushed back onto the Qualicum Woods neighborhood, but we do ask that the town and airport management put into place an enforceable flight path that does not have planes constantly turning south early and flying over our acreages, properties, and the Pheasant Glen development, which is, in the works. The new and incessant air traffic and training circuits that are performed by pilots are putting our families and livestock in extremely stressful situations with the noise, the pollution, and putting us in danger as our livestock react to the loud engine noises. Some of us, me included, have already had injuries from our livestock that are directly related to the aircraft flying over our properties, and I have mentioned that at past when I've stood up here and in letters and in emails. Council has been made aware of me, who has had 3 injuries related to airplanes. And I know some of you had horses before, but for those of you that haven't, horses are flight animals. That means when they get scared, they don't stay and fight, they get the heck out of there. And if you're in the way, it's okay, they'll just run right over you. They'll run through a fence if there's a perceived danger. What's that?
I just said ostriches.
Oh, ostriches, probably too. The average horse weighs 1,200 pounds. When they're spooked by something, they do whatever it takes to save themselves. I have personally been thrown, stepped on, and had a horse fall on top of me while it is reacting to the airplane noise, or the large shadow. Picture riding your horse on a sunny day and this huge shadow comes across your riding arena, and I'm on a dressage horse who is not a jumper, and he leaps over. It's really hard to stay on. So it's not just the noise, it's them flying directly over our property. So a large shadow that moves across the ground as the plane flies overhead. For the town to continue encouraging pilots to change their flight path and fly over our properties has become willful negligence, as they have been aware of the danger that they are causing for many months now. Some of us have lived in the area for 3 years. Some of us have lived here for 36 years. Up until the GNP was put in place over a year ago, we were relatively happy with the amount of air traffic and the fact that they usually only flew over our properties when landing, which is far quieter than when the engines are powered up on takeoff. The good news is that we feel we can offer some reasonable and relatively easy solutions to the problem. I wrote this before hearing the other presentations, so I'll just read it as I had it, and you can hear it as you will. So I have 3 solutions. The first one, we asked that council direct staff to move ahead with putting in, it was the revised NAP that I think Terry talked about first and was actually up on the screen in the green. We felt that it might be a good compromise because I certainly don't want to push it back on the Qualicum Woods people because I hate it myself. To do the revised NAP, so which would include the new noise sensitive areas because that's where it would take it into effect in a way that is enforceable. And this could be done, well, I'm not sure if this is right, but this could be done by placing them into the noise abatement procedure and registering it in the Canadian Flight Supplement for both IFR and VFR. I'm not sure if that's what you were saying you could do before. With this, pilots could follow a flight path that many of them would be familiar with. It would direct them to fly straight out on this route and not turn until they have passed the new noise-sensitive areas. And we understand, of course, that pilots could vary this if safety were ever an issue, then that would be fine. The second solution, we ask that the training circuits be prohibited over residences as they're the major contributing factor to the unrest of the citizens that are affected by airplane noise. I do know that other airports have done this, so I'm not sure how. There is a way it can be done. I'm not sure how. There's also the option of asking for the PPE, prior approval request, PPR, can't remember what it was, but that's an option. I think Squamish does that. So there are things that can be done. And the third thing is the helicopter training over residences. It just doesn't make sense to us that it's allowed over residences. And I believe that the airport management can approve helicopter training. So in my mind, they could also maybe disapprove. I'm not sure. So we feel that the above solutions will be a win-win-win-win outcome for the pilots, the council, because they'll be getting less complaints, the residents, and the Pheasant Glen development. And due to the safety and liability issues, we ask that these solutions be put into place as soon as possible before any of us are seriously injured. Honestly, I get on my horse now, and I feel worried, and I'm not a nervous rider. I'm not. I'll get on a horse that someone else doesn't want to, but when there's airplanes doing circuits, I think, maybe I'll wait an hour and go out and ride then. But I can't always do that with my day, because maybe I have a meeting in an hour. Maybe my kids need something. So it's affecting my life, it's affecting my safety and that of my neighbors with animals. And I think that is all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms.
Now,
Willis.
this has signatures on it. Should I hand it
Yes.
to the staff?
Please present it to Ms. Ranson.
Okay, thank you. Oh, my water bottle.
So next is Joe Tudor.
Thank you to Mayor, Council, CAO Varela, and staff. We appreciate your ongoing work on airport noise and on the defining new noise-sensitive areas. And thank you to pilots who make every effort to avoid communities wherever possible. My name is Joanne Tudor, and I'm a resident, healthcare provider, and taxpayer in Qualicum Woods. Prior to 2016, Qualicum Woods was not under the flight path. The long-standing pre-2016 route, published for years in the Canadian Flight Supplement, turned left at the railway tracks, well away from our neighborhood. That changed in 2016 when the noise abatement procedure was introduced. Although meant to mitigate noise, it instead pushed aircraft directly over high-density residential areas like Qualicum Woods. Since then, many of us have lived with constant intrusive noise, made worse when the NAP is violated, which happens frequently. There's also a misconception circulating online that only a small handful of residents are concerned, or that we want the airport shut down. Neither is true. The 180 or so petition signatures gathered so far in 2025 represent only a portion of those affected. Hundreds more raise concerns through the town's airport survey, and many have spoken at meetings like this. We value having an airport. We simply want to work constructively with the town and with pilots to reduce unnecessary noise. The voluntary Good Neighbor program has helped somewhat over my neighborhood, obviously not everywhere, and we thank the pilots who follow it. But voluntary measures can only go so far. In contrast, Sealand Flight School voluntarily adopted a different route in 2025, essentially the old pre-2016 path. And because they use it exclusively, noise complaints dropped significantly. That tells us the solution is already known and already proven. And my understanding is that I'll just carry on. Residents from multiple noise-sensitive areas are therefore united in recommending an amended noise abatement procedure based on that quieter, safer, familiar pre-2016 flight path. The proposed route would direct aircraft away from neighborhoods and the future Pheasant Glen development. It would avoid all current and proposed noise-sensitive areas. It requires departure from runway 29 to turn before the railway tracks, fly straight west at least 1.5 nautical miles, and climb to 1,500 feet before turning north or south. And it would match the Sealand route that is already working in practice. This amended noise abatement procedure would apply to visual flight rules and instrument flight rule flights, and to all fixed wing and helicopter training. And unlike the Good Neighbor program, it can be enforceable. Transport Canada has confirmed that the town and airport manager can request this change and have it published in the Canadian Flight Supplement without lengthy legal review. And we are asking Mayor and Council to act now. Please file the amended noise abatement procedure with Transport Canada and make this route a regulation all aircraft must follow. This is a practical, proven, community-supported solution. A win-win for residents, pilots, and the town of Qualicum Beach. Let's take this opportunity to correct a failed procedure and improve safety, livability, and harmony in our community. Thank you. And just one quick, we've got about 180 signed petitions, which I'll drop in tomorrow. And I really appreciate all the efforts going into this. I am concerned, however, with the flight path going directly over my house with the idea that was proposed earlier today, that I would recommend the one that I've described here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next is Gary Willis.
Mayor, council members, CEO Villa, and staff. I just have a couple of points. I'm a little perplexed as to why a petition would be accepted that sort of negates our free speech, and that's what it's alluding to. That's what they're trying to do, so we can't complain anymore. Everyone has the right to complain, whether wrong or right, and that's in the Canadian thing. So I'm surprised that that was accepted. And we were told at a future previous meeting that the airport costs the taxpayers like 17 cents a day per person or something around that. And I was just wondering why council voted to be less transparent on the cost of the airport if it costs so little. So if it doesn't cost that much, why would it be less transparent?
Okay, thank you. Isabella.
Thank you, Your Worship. So it was probably 3 years ago now that the town implemented its new strategic planning and budgeting process and produced the financial plan that's now both a financial document and a communication tool. So the costs to the airport are clearly laid out in that, and if any members of the public wish staff to help them find that within that financial plan, that content is in there. And so prior to 3 years ago, you couldn't actually see where the costs for the airport or really anything else were in the town. So we moved from mere spreadsheets to a very robust document, and we're happy to help the public with that piece if they need some additional assistance.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And next is Ms. Williams.
Hello, I'm Dilys Williams, and I'm a resident of Qualicum Woods and a taxpayer in Qualicum Beach. And Qualicum Woods, as we know, was tracked and planned in the town's Act of Incorporation in 1942, and the airport was established in 1954. So we're aware that Qualicum Woods plans predate the airport by 12 years. I have lived in Qualicum Woods for 20 years, from Toronto. We bought in 2006 when the old flying route, as you'd put up there, was listed in the Canadian Flight Supplement, turning left again at the railway tracks, you've heard it before, after departing from the airport and not flying anywhere near Qualicum Woods. We actually did check with the town prior to buying our house, and we were told, oh, not to worry, you're not under the flight path, you're not anywhere near it. So we lived in peace and quiet for 10 years with the old flight path. Then the noise abatement procedure, as you know and heard and are well aware of, was instituted in 2016. And this NAP, the acronym NAP, was instituted to mitigate noise. Well, it hasn't. It hasn't mitigated noise in Qualicum Beach. Elsewhere, perhaps, but not in Qualicum Woods. So now for the last 10 years, we are near a flight path, sometimes under a flight path, when the NAP is violated, which occurs very often. And you'll see how often it occurs when you look at the complaints that Mr. Goldfuss had put up in previous meetings. And I can vouch for the fact that I'm one of the people reporting these NAP violations. I do not recall any opportunity to have a voice to the change in this new flight path, this noise abatement route. It just happened. This NAP has made a huge noise footprint over Qualicum Woods for almost 10 years now. Noise complaints escalated once it was made a regulation route, and numerous noise complaints are due to this NAP that literally forces planes to fly over homes in Qualicum Woods into a densely populated area. The institution by the town of the Good Neighbor policy a year or so ago helped a bit. It was a good attempt, but sadly it is voluntary and followed only by a very few pilots. Sealand Flight School in the summer of 2025 voluntarily instituted a new route to help mitigate noise. an outstanding accomplishment. This Sealand route is identical to the old route prior to 2016, and Sealand uses it exclusively, and because of this, noise complaints have dropped. They've dropped considerably, and this speaks volumes. However, other itinerant planes and training schools from the mainland don't use this Sealand route at all, but continue to use the NAP, so we continue to get all the noise. We need a solution that takes the best of the NAP, the best of the Sealand, and avoids the noise-sensitive areas for both current and ones in process. And we know that the town is working on the noise-sensitive areas in process. So you have seen this route that was put up by Terry Tobin and that Joe Tudor just spoke about. And just to reiterate, it's departing runway 29, turning south before the railway tracks, just like the old route, maintain a straight course west for at least 1.5 nautical miles, and reach an altitude of at least 1,500 feet before turning north or south. Now, that's a little bit different than the current NAP, which says 1,000 feet. So this route has been presented to you today. It's an amended NAP, that's what we've been calling it, the one that's being proposed and requested. It's quieter, it directs traffic from high-density areas to sparsely populated ones, away from areas like Qualicum Woods and the future Pheasant Glen, and it avoids all current and proposed noise-sensitive areas. But one of the most important things it does is it's a safer route. It provides open fields to land in case of emergencies. And that's very important because we saw last week about that tragic accident that occurred in Nanaimo that managed to land in a field. There are no open fields in Qualicum Woods. This amended NAP is also similar, as you've heard, to the Sealand route that pilots have known for years. It puts planes high enough at 1,500 feet, not 1,000, that the current NAP does, to mitigate the noise. If you look online, the difference between 1,000 feet and 1,500 feet means, do you want to hear a flying gas lawnmower over you, or do you want to hear a nice quiet Dyson vacuum? I personally would like to hear the vacuum. It's a big difference in sound from the ground, so it minimizes noise over all the noise-sensitive areas and including downtown Qualicum Beach. This amended NAP is the ultimate solution. So please, Town Council, please make it a Transport Canada regulation to be followed, not a voluntary one that can be ignored. We know what voluntary programs do here. They aren't followed. This is an opportunity for Council and Town of Qualicum Beach and Transport Canada to correct this failed procedure now and put in an amended, improved one. We'd like to see the town file this amended NAP with Transport Canada, of course put it into the Canadian Flight Supplement, and then it's a regulation to be followed by all planes and all helicopters, and apply it to all types of flying. Instrument flight rules, visual flight rules, everything that's stated in the Canadian Flight Supplement. And the other advantage is that it can be done without the time-consuming involvement of the legal branch of Transport Canada. So all it needs now is the administrative work to make it happen. Let's all work together for the betterment, the safety, and the quality of life in this community of ours called Qualicum Beach. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Carol or Fred Dow. Who'd like to go first?
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. It's good to be with you again. Thank you so much for hearing the heartbeat of our area. As you can hear, there are a lot of concerns, and I'm going to respond in this way. When I heard about this petition saying that, first of all, I want to say we love our airport. Fred and I go out of here 4 times a year, a round trip. We love this airport. There's been such a terrible thing being said that we wanted to put the airport down. That certainly is not the case. Fred and I have lived in, Qualicum Beach area for 40 years. And the change that took place 9 years ago is when the flight path, as everyone has mentioned, changed. Because I was so concerned about this petition that came out and what it was saying, and I'm in my 80s, and my husband is too, I went out and knocked on doors yesterday and the day before, and I have 63 more signatures to add. And they are all of the woods. I'd like you to see them. Yes. But to know that they are. Yes, yes. So that you can see these are. Yes, thank you. These are all of the woods addresses. They are not out of the area. And other parts of BC. These are Qualicum Woods. These are Qualicum Woods addresses and people who are very concerned. We had friends visiting us that were very serious about coming to live in our area this summer, and we were on our deck. And I think I've heard others say the number of touch and goes, it was every 5 minutes. We had to stop conversation within an hour 20 times. It was just horrible. And this goes on very often, so it's not just a one-off. Now, the other thing that I'm concerned about is we have many senior elderly people living in our area that are recovering from surgeries, that are Alzheimer's, that have all sorts of diagnoses. And these, the plane traffic is very hard to take when you're trying to recover. And our caregivers are very important to us that are taking care of the loved ones that have these conditions. So I'm asking you, Mr. Mayor and Council, what will you be doing to help us? We need your help very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, Council, Fred Dow, Qualicum Woods. I was listed to speak in case you didn't get enough information, but I think you've overloaded with information. And I'd just like to say, I used to fly in and out of Qualicum Airport personally, and that was, people my age like to talk about the good old days, and that was the good old days when we turned left, and there didn't seem to be any problem in Qualicum Woods or elsewhere, even with the pilots, till your federal government told us to remove one little sign. And after that, here we are 10 years later, getting back to flying pretty close to the original old flight plan. So I'm going to give you a Christmas present and stop my little speech. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Fred. Next is Pam McDowell.
Hello, thank you, Mayor and Council, for giving me an opportunity to speak. I live on Qualicum Road between Rupert Road and Mant Road. Unfortunately, I guess for me, it's agricultural land, low density, and I'd like to object to the proposed VTPC and NAP that people have been talking about today as a win-win situation, because both would direct every single flight out of the airport directly over my home. I've had to live with the noise from the airport day in and day out, low-flying training flights directly over my home. I'm hoping that that's not going to get even worse in the future. I would request that council search for some sort of solution to the airport noise that doesn't place 100% of the burden on those of us who happen to live in the low-density agricultural lands underneath both of those proposed flight paths going directly west from the airport. It seems unfair that any residents should have to bear all of the burden of the airport noise. And so I would ask that before you adopt either of those solutions, that you consider the impact on those of us who'll be directly under those flight paths. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Doug Durante.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Durant, D-U-R-R-A-N-T. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'd like to thank Councillor Harrison for being as proactive as he was in discussing some of the positive directions that our airport can take. Up till now, really, it isn't all that positive from what I've been listening to. But that being said, noise abatement violations, Q1, Q2, there was one. Noise abatement violations in Q2 through to Q4, or Q3 through to Q4, there were 2 noise abatement violations. 175 total. 51% comes from one single address. 112 complaints are made up of residences in the flight path. What more can we do as a pilot? We'll do what you want us to do. We're trained that way, but 175 calls, 88 from one residence, we can't compete with that. We're too busy training. Training doesn't equate to making noise. We're being lawful. We're following the rules. I've heard people describe a successful noise abatement procedure as failed. Many, many violations. I'll reiterate again, there was one noise abatement procedure violation in Q1 and Q2. And there were 2 noise abatement violations in Q3 and Q4. So we need to really think long and hard about some of the information that we're receiving here and where we take it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Durant. I'm sorry, sorry, no, please. Thank you. Sorry, I mispronounced your name to begin with. Sorry, I mispronounced your name to begin. Durant. Durant, yeah. I know what it's like. People mispronounce my name all the time. Thank you. Todd Provost.
Mayor, good to see you. Council, CAO Varela, and staff. Thank you to council and staff for continuing to hold the Committee of the Whole meetings on the airport to discuss issues that impact the quality of life of residents on a daily basis. We want to start by stating, as we have always done in our advocacy on the airport, it is our goal to coexist with our airport when we present solutions to council and staff. We would also ask the council fully consider the years of advocacy, research, and solutions offered by tax-paying residents of Qualicum Beach, such as ourselves, who live near the airport, when you consider issues relating to the airport. And also please remember the comments of over 700 people who responded to the airport survey conducted by the town. They told you in the vast majority of comments that they are concerned about noise and lead issues. And also consider the hundreds of people who attended the public meetings such as tonight's on the airport held by council and who expressed their concerns over daily airport noise and its impact on our quality of life. do please consider that those same people have asked council as airport managers to use the authorities which Transport Canada have clearly stated in writing are within your ability to take action. We want to thank staff for the work they've done on the expansion of noise-sensitive areas, or NSAs, already. As we have all discovered over the years, we've been discussing airport concerns. These are complex issues with multiple layers of government involvement, policies, and regulations. This complexity also presents evolving solutions, though, for improvements. We appreciate that the Good Neighbor program was implemented in Qualicum Beach and thank the many pilots who comply with this voluntary program. So thank you. However, as we have experienced, voluntary programs are not always complied with. And when they aren't followed, there is little ability for airport management to take action. This inability to take action would also apply to noise-sensitive areas. Both of these concerns were highlighted by Mr. Goldfuss to Council just minutes ago. That is why we believe the most effective solution for noise mitigation at our airport is one that is enforceable. This solution also reflects what has been proven as effective for our community. It would also avoid the unintended consequences of relying on noise-sensitive areas for all of Eagle Crest while still leaving a flight corridor over Qualicum Woods, which would actually increase air traffic over us. At the start of 2025, Sealand Flight began their own voluntary policy, which applied to those using their planes at our airport, and we provided council and staff with that map that they adopted. And so you can see here, council, you should have it in your package. Their policy was to adopt the flight paths from past Canada Flight Supplements, CFS, to guide their pilots. As you can see, they actually cut out the map from a published CFS for Qualicum Beach and placed it beside what were the existing and proposed noise-sensitive areas. Since Sealand adopted this policy, there have been a significant reduction in noise experienced by area residents, so much so that noise complaints about Sealand's planes in Qualicum Beach have almost been eliminated. A year of experience with this policy has now informed the community on what actually works here. Providing pilots with clearly defined procedures and requirements relating to preferred minimum noise routes, which is described and permitted by Noise Canada in the regulation for noise abatement. Combined with this experience and the information we and staff have learned about airport policies, we know that in order for this to be truly effective, any policy changes must be within the noise abatement procedure, or the NAP. Mr. Sarazin of Transport Canada told us in April of 2024, Fred and myself met with him, that we have the benefit of having a noise abatement procedure already published in the CFS. He explained that means expanding upon the NAP would rely upon a more simplified execution of the Transport Canada process. It's an amendment. It's not a new NAP. Those were his words. He explained the benefit of having one published already in the CFS to us. For these reasons, we believe that the good work done by staff, that they've already done and discussed with NAV Canada on the proposed noise-sensitive area expansions, should enhance the noise abatement procedure. Staff have advised council that implementing the changes could take up to 6 months, and that delaying requests to regulators such as NAV Canada will result in further delays. We know from Mr. Goldfuss's reporting that Transport Canada has stated that the town's submitted questions are not time sensitive. We heard that today, so don't expect a reply anytime soon. Unfortunately, this update comes after a year of waiting for a reply from Transport Canada. We do know, however, from Mr. Jamie Johnson, who is the Regional Director, Civil Aviation Pacific of Transport Canada, that requested changes have to come from airport management and are available right now to our community. Quote, he said, "The Qualicum Beach Airport is responsible for day-to-day noise management. and it is at their discretion to designate noise-sensitive areas or initiate a noise abatement process. I encourage you to continue your dialogue with the town of Qualicum Beach on this matter, and that was in September of this year. We also know from Mr. Johnson that Transport Canada will meet with QWRA and airport management to offer expert advice on these changes. And he said, should a meeting be scheduled to take place with the residents and the town of Qualicum Beach, Transport Canada can participate in the discussion to provide regulatory and subject matter expertise. And that reply was Transport Canada replying to our request and invitation to meet with them in October 25. And as we saw in Ms. Varela's presentation, the wording I found a bit unusual. There was a lot of no, but. I would have preferred to have seen yes, but. You know, and I think this speaks to the importance, though, of all of us sitting down together at the same table with Transport Canada there to help us. Because no argument, these are complex matters. And it does require a lot of minutia being going over and then fully understanding all at the same table, all at the same time. Much as you've done with the Committee of the Whole meetings so that you all hear the information, it would be amazing for all of us to accept that invitation from Transport Canada and be there together to hear that. Our community has been waiting years for improvements to noise mitigation, so we are seeking the solutions which will be most effective. We know you share this goal of effective noise mitigation for our community. We therefore ask Council to, 1, use the map proven effective by Sealand as a guide for implementing these changes. 2, build upon the amazing staff work on noise-sensitive areas. We know NAVCAN have approved those expansions to the NSAs. They must, however, include all of Qualicum Woods to provide noise mitigation protection to the 1,200+ residents of Qualicum Woods, the Evergreens, and the Aldous areas, similar to what has been proposed for all of Eagle Crest. That's all we're asking. Placing wording that is the equivalent of NSAs that complements the noise abatement procedure is one possible solution. Include both visual flight rules and instrument flight rules in the noise abatement procedure. Utilize accepted language from past and current CFS documents that include wording such as avoid noise-sensitive areas. And in the presentation earlier, you saw that example from an earlier CFS. Reconsider staff's previous efforts to have the altitude for planes in the noise abatement procedure to reflect, quote, no turns below 1,500 feet above sea level. QWA was advised in 2021 that this was explored by the QB Airport Users Committee and had been supported by Mr. Jeff Graham, Deputy Airport Manager at the time. That 1,500 feet, as mentioned earlier, will make a difference for the majority of people in those designated noise-sensitive areas, and even the lady that spoke earlier on Qualicum Road. Getting up to 1,500 feet instead of 1,000 feet, I understand, is about a 6 decibel difference, which from the ground does have a significant impact. And finally, accept Transport Canada's written offer of meeting with QWA and the town to provide subject matter expertise on noise-sensitive areas and the noise abatement process. These solutions will be a win for pilots, as this would be a clearly defined route they are familiar with, and they have flown in the past in our community. This route has also been flown safely by Sealand planes in this area for the past year. The solutions will be a win for our community, as they will greatly improve noise mitigation and reduce exposure to lead for the most densely populated areas near the airport. And they will be a win for council and staff, as there will be a decrease in noise complaints, which will be a decrease in the time and resources required of airport staff. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Provost. Next is Mike Andrews.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, and staff, thank you very much for having us all here tonight. And My name is Mike Andrews. I'm happy to be wearing two hats speaking to you tonight. I get to work with Sealand Flight on a variety of special projects as well as some flying, and I'm also the vice president at the local Qualicum Beach Flying Club. So thank you very much. And I'd like to start by commending you all and staff for endeavoring to understand and learn and implement this complex realm. I've been in aviation for about 12 years, professionally for about 6, and there is a lot of nuance. You know, we're talking about NAPs and NSAs and VTPCs and then just the industry standard. There's a lot to wrap your head around, and all, again, the nuance involved with each one. So I don't envy you for having to take this all on and then decide which route is best and going to be most effective for all of your residents. So I think that is huge, and I would just like to say thank you and good on you. I'd also like to say thank you to the residents who have praised the changes that Sealand Flight has made in the last year. It's clear that it has had some help and positive effect in mitigating some of the noise, and we're happy to do that and help in every way that we can to continue furthering that. Additionally, I loved several of the things that Councillor Harrison brought up at the very beginning, looking towards the electric aviation, which is a huge pillar for our business. That's something that we're really passionate about, looking towards the future of how do we make aviation more sustainable, primarily economically, but also noise-wise as well. We are approaching the point where we're ready to start installing our own kind of personal, smaller chargers at airports, including Qualicum Beach. It's not quite at the level of the quotes that we saw earlier, the $1 million plus, but it will be sufficient for our own personal operations to begin operating electric aircraft in the near future. There's actually a few small, exciting updates in the electric aviation world that we'd like to present tonight. If you're not aware already, that flight schools have now been, it's nationwide that flight schools have now been allowed to operate electric aircraft, and the electric aircraft that we have is approved in Canada for basically any flight school to purchase and now operates unrestrictedly. There's also a lot of movement towards more sustainable options, such as the Helijet has just had a demonstration of their fixed-wing electric aircraft in Vancouver, as well as a Canadian manufacturer that's manufacturing electric aircraft in Ontario. And so those are just some of the updates that we are excited to share and be a part of to help the advancement of aviation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Next is Tony Purser.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship, members of council, staff, and members of the public. Thank you for this opportunity to present. My name's Tony Purser, and I serve as the president of the Qualicum Beach Flying Club, which, if people don't know, is a not-for-profit that has been active in the community for more than 60 years. And we have 150 members in the club currently, and we're obviously very invested in the long-term success and viability of the Qualicum Beach Airport. Our commitment to this community is significant and long-standing. Together with Sealand Aviation, we support the town's Good Neighbor program. We also host safety seminars, mentor young pilots, and provide essential help during emergencies, such as hosting the BC wildfire people that were at the airport for almost a month, fighting fires day and night, and also the BC Hydro crews that train on helicopter ingress and egress for multiple days at the airport. This fall, we held our Discover Aviation event, which gave 70 local children their first ride in a small aircraft That was completely free, so we did that for 70 kids and one teddy bear, I'm always reminded. And it was an entire effort that was done by volunteers from the Flying Club and their spouses and others in the area. And of course, as was mentioned, beyond these contributions, the operational importance of the airport is undeniable. During the Wesley Ridge fire, it served, as we saw, as a vital base of operations for firefighting aircraft and crews. And situations like this underscore the simple truth that having a functional, well-supported airport saves time, saves resources, and can actually save lives. There's been some discussion about the recent Change.org petition that a woman named Angie Roberts collected, currently about 3,000 signatures. And we can debate the signatures and things like that, but what I found most interesting in that petition was reading the almost 60 different written comments that were included along with those signatures. And a lot of these individuals stated specific roads that they lived on or had lived on around the airport. And I was surprised at how many of them living very close to the airport were huge supporters of it and were not bothered by the noise from aircraft departing and arriving at the airport. And I guess it just sort of made me realize how there is an overwhelming number of people in this community that do see the airport as a valuable resource. And I know we're not trying to say here that, that people want to shut down the airport. And there was some definite pushback on the title of that petition. And again, I don't know the person that started it or anything. I'm just aware of it because of our role here in Qualicum. But the petition's title, Protect Our Qualicum Beach Airport from Noise Complaints, I think is actually an apt title, because what I've noticed in the last few meetings is that we're here to talk about the airport. And Councillor Harrison did that at the beginning of this meeting, talking about having a vision, trying to weigh opportunities that we have versus the costs for them, and trying to do something proactive. There's so many things that could be done to improve the airport and create more revenue opportunities for the town, but the ongoing noise complaints sort of suck up all the oxygen in the room, and we're not talking about the airport. It's a single topic meeting, which is local residents debating each other about whose house the planes should be flying over. And I don't know that there's any final solution to that quandary other than shutting down the airport, which I'm not in favor of. And it's a little bit like trying to put a queen-sized bed sheet on a king-sized bed. It seems that every time we move it one way, somebody else complains. So we pull it back this way and someone else complains. I don't have a horse in the race as far as what the actual flight path is. What I do totally agree with is that it belongs in the CFS, in the Canadian Flight Supplement, so that all the pilots are doing the same thing. If that turns out to be the procedure that Sealand is flying, great, I'm happy with that. If it turns out to be something else that the neighbors are proposing, fantastic. But it should be one thing, not four things like we have right now, because that is a terrible safety concern. And so I guess my main concern is that this town council, you're a very, very valuable resource in this town, and so much time is being used up on this topic. I wish we could just make a decision, get it published in the CFS, and then start to talk about the future of the airport and what we can do to improve it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Purser. Now, please, the reason why I insist on respectful behavior, this is a work-safe environment, and that's why I wouldn't allow the attack on the alleged, what Mr. Councillor Harrison has said. I have to stop that. It's my role to make sure everybody in the room, council, staff, and councillors to feel safe. That's why I'm asking you to withhold any kind of reaction so that everybody who may not agree with you can feel safe to speak as well. Next is Robert Filmer.
Twice in one day. Good for you guys. Robert Filmer, 138 2nd Avenue East. I want to thank the previous speaker because he sort of took the words out of my mouth. You know, when we look back, there's been a lot of work put into the airport. I know because I was sitting in your chairs. Between 2018 and 2022, a tremendous amount of work between local money, provincial government grants and federal government grants went into the airport. The terminal, airport lighting, airport parking, the airport fuel system, the search and rescue facility now at the airport. Even before that, the town took over the undertaking of taking over the Air Cadet hangar and helping the local Air Cadets out. I think it's imperative that you remember this, whether it's now or tomorrow. I say this, I work in senior aviation management for a large Canadian airline. I am actually their Transport Canada designate and post holder, so I understand how hard it is to work with Transport Canada, because that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I live in the cars and the CAS and all of those 602, 604, 705 numbers. I live and breathe in those, so I understand the complexities. I also understand how difficult Transport Canada can be to deal with sometimes. But remember the work that's already been put into the airport. The more restrictions, and I'm not going to weigh either side of what noise abatement is or isn't, but remember that the job, I remember in 2018, the conversation was, how do we attract business to the airport? How do we make sure that the airport is generating a positive revenue? And unfortunately, COVID-19 hit and the aviation sector tanked. However, it has now bounced back stronger than it was before COVID-19. So the town should now be looking at that. How do you capitalize on that? And you have the resources. That's why we renovated the terminal and improved the airport lighting and improved the airport fuel and put in paid parking and all these different things, because we had this vision for the airport that then was unfortunately lost. When you look at just business in general, you look at how the aviation sector, the more restrictions you start to put in place, whether or not you look at noise abatement or moving the noise abatement procedure, and again, I'm not going to weigh on either side, but you need to make sure that the town is generating that positive revenue. Your residents, and you know, the comments of some of the residents that signed a petition aren't from Qualicum Beach. The Qualicum Beach Airport serves everyone. I remember, Mayor Westbrook, you would remember throughout your tenure here that you would, how many times have you approached the City of Parksville and said, hey, help us pay for this? Or the regional district said, hey, help pay for this. Those conversations need to continue. It's not only Qualicum Beach residents that are flying out of the airport or using the airport. Guaranteed, if you go to our local airline, it's not just our residents flying on their airline. It's residents of the RDN, it's residents of the City of Parksville, it might be even a broader base. So remember that. Remember the investment that's been put into the airport. It's unfortunate to hear that some further grants were denied, and I'm glad that the town is going to continue watching those and running after them. But we've already invested so much into the airport, and you can't start walking back. The further restrictions we start putting on the airport, whether it's flight paths or businesses or whatever we try to do, it's going to start limiting. As soon as we start limiting ourselves, we've lost the airport. It needs to generate that revenue, but it also needs to be a place where, whether it be an airline or a business or a new flight school or whatever you have, will look at Qualicum Beach and say, I want to put a business there. And right now, there's probably not, because they know that the public perception of the airport isn't great. And you know, I remember when we talked about airport lands, I remember going to multiple meetings throughout my term, sitting down with the province. And I remember those conversations weren't, no, you can't do anything with your airport lands. The conversations were, good luck, it's going to be tough. But that's your job, right? The five of you, you're here for a tough job. It's a tough job, I know, it's tough work. But it's our job as residents to support you in that tough work, right? When we look at those airport lands, if we know that we can't, the airport itself isn't going to generate the revenue, look at those lands. It's not impossible. I remember, you're welcome to my notes of those multiple meetings with the province. They never said no. They did say it's going to be tough. And there's avenues to explore. We unfortunately didn't get the chance, whether it be COVID-19 or plans changed or priorities shifted. But you should still be searching after those and looking at the opportunity for those lands to make money. Again, you can't limit yourself, but the answer from the province was never no. Right, so you need to put in that time, the 5 of you, with staff to say we want this land is usable, and it's going to be tough, and it's going to be our job to support you in that. I fully support that those lands should still be looked after and explored. Your options, I can't say endless, are endless, but they're certainly there, and you should really continue to explore that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Filmer. That was the end of the list that I have. Are there any people in the gallery? Oh, there's more. Thank you. So after I go to this list, I will still ask if anybody else in the gallery wishes to speak. So next is Sigmund Sword.
Good evening, Your Worship, honored councillors, learned staff. I appreciate the opportunity that you extend to your community and your region for us to come and share our most recent thoughts and feelings with regards to the jewel in the crown, the Qualicum Beach Airport. Okay, I just tipped my bias there at the close of that opening statement. Yes, I support the airport and its existence and its continued health to improve. But I don't do so in a right, wrong, on, off, good, bad, sort of 0-1 type of lens. I think the airport, kind of like all of us in this room, we're multifaceted, we're complicated. Things aren't as straightforward as you might think. At first blush, we might think we know something that we're looking at when once we do our homework, we learn that it's far more complicated than we first thought. I'd like to commend the ongoing research and efforts to educate both the town of Qualicum Beach and its staff, as well as the public, about what's possible in finding the least negative impact on the region while maximizing the benefits of operating the airport. Aviation is a very complicated, federally regulated form of transportation that is oceanic in breadth, in depth, in rules, regulations, and policies to safely move people and goods throughout Canada and the world. The Rotary Club had the foresight and the vision to start that airport in 1954, and most of us in the room, perhaps all, did not own property in the town of Qualicum Beach when that airport was there. And I know that in real estate law, you're supposed to be told about airports and such things before you buy a piece of property and so forth, as it will allow you to make a well-informed decision. Lifelong learning is just that. Let's continue to work collaboratively in a healthy and respectful manner to maximize the benefits of the airport while minimizing the costs, be them monetary or otherwise. May you go forward in health and happiness. Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Sword. Next is Jennifer Newstead.
Hello, Mayor and Council and all the folks behind me and on the stream. I wish I brought snacks. This is longer than expected. I'm Jennifer Newstead. I live in what is known as Qualicum Beach West. This is not an area I knew about when I grew up here as a young human, but I was recently reintroduced to my neighborhood. A new neighbor was introducing me to someone else and said, I'm the new old kid on the block because I have just returned to Qualicum Beach after living in the big city of Vancouver for 26 years. When I moved back here, I flew Esqueo Air because I've been flying Esqueo Air for 4 years. It has been how I've stayed connected with my parents, and it is a phenomenal 25-minute flight that you will giggle delightfully every time you fly over BC ferries. So I also just want to share the impact of this airline. I have my little notes here. beats driving to Nanaimo. This is what someone said on my most recent flight. I was going to Vancouver on Esqueo Air for work, and someone in the back said, it beats driving to Nanaimo. That's the essential service that this airline provides. When we all think about the ways that we come to the island, BC Ferries is one of those options. We all have complaints about that service as well. The airline is so great. There's folks in this room that I know fly the airline who have signed both petitions. It's delightful to be at the airport and see folks welcoming their family members from afar. It's their first time coming to Qualicum Beach. It's just such a wonderful service. And you know, this year Esqueo Air, they bring all of the sculptors in for Parksville Beach Fest. They're doing a lot for the community, and I think that it's really special to just shine some love on this little airport. Planes fly over my parents' house where I now live. I think it's delightful that I can hear that it's a Piper Navajo, and it's making those connections for folks to get between Qualicum Beach and Vancouver. So gratitude for your time. Thank you. Love the airport. Love that tonight, since I was at the last meeting, that there's been a shift in the narrative of sort of what we're doing here. So glad to hear everyone loves the airport. Thanks.
Thank you. I have a request for a 5-minute recess. So could I have a motion to have a break? Councillor Harrison, Councillor Vandervalk, all in favor? I think we'll be back in a few minutes. Thank you. So I'm calling the meeting back to order, and the next speaker on the list is Tiara Fraser. And if I could ask people in the lobby to either go outside or come inside and be quiet so we don't get interrupted. Excuse me, to the people in the lobby. Thank you. Ms. Tiara, go ahead.
Tansei Kiwao, hello to all of you. My name is Tiara Fraser, and I'm the founder of Esqueo Air. I'm also a proud Métis woman who's acknowledging that I'm an uninvited guest on the lands of the Qualicum Beach, or the Qualicum First Nation, pardon me. In 2025, we'll move more than 7,000 passengers between Qualicum Beach and Vancouver, and approximately 60% of those will be Qualicum Beach residents. We've been serving this community for 4.5 years. That is hard for me to believe right now. I had memories, as Robert Filmer was talking about those times in 2018. 4.5 years. We are connecting people to land, to communities, to exploration, to business, to work, to school even. We've watched a young human grow up in our airline as they travel to the school that can meet their needs in Vancouver every week, back and forth. We're connecting people to family, to loved ones, to home here on Qualicum Beach. I'll speak very briefly on the noise abatement procedures and NSAs, and it's complicated. Very complicated, and I appreciate the efforts that everyone is going to figure out a way. Airport noise is going to happen, and it's got to be challenging. If you direct the traffic this way, that impacts people. If you move the traffic this way, it impacts people. I wonder to myself, if you were to just let it be and traffic were to be moving over different places at different times where that was a shared burden of the community, if that may be one possible consideration. I will make an IFR clarification. IFR is Instrument Flight Rules. Instrument Flight Rules will not apply in the CFS, and Instrument Flight Rules means that we are navigating by instruments. We cannot see outside. We cannot see a horizon. We cannot see trees. We cannot see houses in IMC conditions or when when we're in cloud. So we have a strict departure procedure and a strict approach into the airport that we cannot deviate from even a tiny wee bit, and those are issued by Transport Canada. So I'll make that slight clarification. And then let's talk money. We'll bring over $400,000 in direct money just in 2025 into the Qualicum Beach Airport through lease fees, fuel, and the airport improvement fee. We strongly object to any consideration to an increase in the AIF, or the airport improvement fee, and in fact would like to see a reduction. The current is $11 per person, the proposed is $13, and an example out of YVR is only $5. An increase in the AIF is directly increase into our ticket prices and is passed on to the traveler. We also object strongly to an increase in the parking, and in fact would like to see us return to where our passengers are not paying for parking and have a parking voucher to ease both the financial as well as the logistical issues that happen with parking. And the last thing that I'll say is the $5 million in ACAP and BCAP grant funds. All the airport improvements that you've seen over the last while and the ones that you hope to do in the future, you are not eligible for without scheduled service into your community. And by increasing and looking for these small amount of pennies in parking and in airport improvement fees, if you haven't really done an analysis of what the financial impact will be to the airport annually, as well as access to any grants, I would urge you to do that thorough analysis of what the not just financial impact would be to your citizens in your community without an airport, or without scheduled service, pardon me, but also what the social impacts would be to your citizens without scheduled service. Because as you increase fees and reduce the viability of this route, it is natural that that will have an impact. And you know, Mr. Filmer said in 2018, the conversation was, what can we do to attract a scheduled service to Qualicum Beach? And I think the question for you today is, what are we doing to retain the scheduled service that we have now? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fraser. Next is Brandon Smith.
Hello, Council and audience behind me. I'd like to thank you all for your time this evening. I understand that these meetings are generally fairly long and arduous, and I also appreciate the respectful discourse between everyone, no matter what side of the fence they sit on. I understand there's a lot of new people here today, and I believe that may have also resulted in some of the clapping that we've heard earlier. I would appreciate if there is no clapping after my speaking, despite whatever side somebody may sit on, so we can continue generally courteous and respectful discourse. I'd like to thank crews and first response for their action this summer with the Wesley Ridge incident and the staging that they did out of the Qualicum Beach Airport. The staff and council have been very courteous and supportive of these efforts whenever responders are here, and they were also extremely appreciative on the ground at the airport as I spoke to them daily of the facilities that were made available through airport users, stakeholders, and the like. Many private hangar owners also offered up their hangars to these crews at no expense and were there all day, all night whenever needed to assist these crews in their action. Some of the key things I'd like to talk about very briefly, and I'll keep it pretty quick because it's getting late, regarding the miscellaneous rates bylaw and some of the numbers that I saw within this. I'd like to draw attention to the flying school rates for January 1st, 2028, and note the per month dollar value at $480.75. This is a $120 jump from the previous year, and then it proceeds to drop down $110 for the next following year, if you would like to reference that, as I believe you have it in front of you right now. The year before is 360, 480, and then 371. I believe it's an error. Could anyone comment on that, just to confirm?
No, I can ask staff to comment after you finish your presentation.
Got that. I'd also like to highlight some of the downstream consequences of some of the proposed changes in rates and airport user fees as well. Just to echo the previous speaker, full disclosure, my role with the airport, I am on the board of executives for the Qualicum Beach Flying Club. I am also presently employed as a flight instructor with Sea Lion Flight, and I teach out of the Qualicum base as well as the Nanaimo base. I live in Parksville. Some of these rates and some of the unknowns relating to this bylaw generate a fair bit of confusion and concern, specifically for double dipping of rates, as we don't believe as a community that these are thought out to the extent that there are some conflicts in, and I think that's a future discussion for town and staff, or rather council and staff, just to confirm that these rates aren't double dipping, they're effective, and they're also relatively in line with where it seems the airport wants to go, and that's encouraging business development. Another point that I'd like to just highlight real quick, because there are 2 hangars being built in Qualicum. One has the roof going on right now, and I heard just through the rumor mill that they're anticipating to put 10 aircraft within that hangar that's being built. Specifically for the sublease rates on this proposed bylaw, because of how vague it is, I see that going either which way and potentially heavily impacting and reducing the potential for investment recovery for the person that is fronting all of the costs for that hangar development, as they were hoping to recoup those costs through allowing people to use the structure in which they are investing in creating here. Finally, I have a recommendation just from where I'm at 23 years old, on behalf of multiple young adults that can't be here tonight because of, 1, the day within the week, it's a Wednesday, and also 2, the time at which this started at. For a lot of people that are my age, I'm in a weird oddity for my ability to be here. They hold traditional roles in employment in other communities, such as Nanaimo and so forth, where they cannot actually come here and be engaged and participate and contribute to this discussion because of the date and time that was selected. I'd also like to highlight the fact that we do this 2 times a year is a fairly large inconvenience for people who try to participate and accommodate the times that are selected, noting the weird time in the week and the conflicts with a regular or traditional work schedule, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, where I'd potentially propose we change this discussion to a more convenient time or once a year to allow for accommodation for those who cannot be in attendance. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, can staff confirm whether the change in the rate was an error or was that planned that way? Ms. Varela?
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff will look into that and bring that back. I don't have the bylaw in front of me, but thank you for pointing that out, and we'll turn our attention to it. Thank you.
Smith's pointing that out. Thank you. Ken Griffith? Ken still here? Nope. Gord Gavin? Gord.
Hello, thank you. I'm Gord Govan. I'm with Skydive Vancouver Island. Your favorite joke, Your Worship, is if at first you don't succeed, skydiving's not for you. So there you go. I've heard that a few times from you. So Your Worship, Councillor, and fellow citizens, I stand before you today to speak for more than just concrete runways and hangars. I speak for opportunity, for connection, for growth, for community. The Qualicum Beach Airport isn't some relic of a bygone era. It's a living resource, a resource that brings people to our doorsteps, students learning to fly, thrill seekers booking skydives, local pilots, medevac services, and tourists exploring Vancouver Island. Among them are the folks at Skydive Vancouver Island, offering an experience that turns fear into exhilaration, and visitors into customers of our restaurants, shops, and accommodations. There's Sealand Flight, training pilots, supporting commerce, sustaining regional connectivity, and Isku Air, moving people from the oceanside area to the world and back again. Recently, in a powerful display of community support, a petition encouraging this town to preserve and support the airport garnered just under 3,000 signatures. Many of these signatories are people who understand that this place represents not noise or nuisance, but opportunity, livelihood, connection. This petition is widely understood to reflect over 3,000 concerned and committed citizens standing up for the airport's future. That support doesn't just matter socially, it matters financially, because facilities like ours, with real commercial aviation activity, are far more likely to attract provincial and federal investment. In the past few years alone, the town of Qualicum Beach has secured substantial funding for the airport. About $1.4 million from the Federal Transport Canada ACAP program used to help with the lighting that was recently redone, and approximately $289,000 from the BC ACAP program for replacement of the avgas fuel storage system. And then roughly another $183,000 from BC CAP for use for the airport parking upgrades in 2020. So taken together, this represents almost $2 million, including early grants, maybe over $2.3 million that we've gotten from provincial and federal authorities. So one of the criteria for reviewing funding is to take landings and takeoffs into utilization. So having commercial operations like ours and Sealand Flight and Isku Air actually benefits the town to the effect of saving a couple of $1 million on upgrades to the airport, that if we weren't there, the town would have to pony up the dough, which would affect all taxpayers. So this isn't charity, it's investment. It's proof that when we nurture commercial activity, when we support those who use and rely on the airport, we strengthen our hand when applying for grant funding. We give the province a reason to invest in our community. So I ask you, do we vilify this airport as a noisy inconvenience, or do we embrace it as a strategic asset with real supporters, real business, real provincial and federal funding to show for it? Because here's the truth. Lose the commercial operations, and we lose the ability to obtain funding. Lose it, and the airport becomes just a strip of asphalt. Keep the activity alive, and the sky becomes our asset. Let's choose growth, let's choose connectivity, let's choose Qualicum Beach Airport, and let the people and businesses that rely on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gavin. Angie Roberts.
Hi. Sorry, I don't do this very often. I moved beside the airport 21 years ago, fully aware and fully accepting that the airport noise would be part of living here. After a recent news article, I became concerned that there might be consequences that could negatively impact the airport and the essential services it provides. That is what prompted me to start the petition. Out of the 3,031 signatures gathered, over 400 are from right here in Qualicum, showing strong local support. I am now taking the time to absorb everything that has been shared during this meeting. I truly hear where everyone is coming from regarding the new flight plans and the Good Neighborhood Program. I understand that concerns are real and that change impacts people differently. At the same time, I believe there is room for a balanced solution so that respects residents while still supporting the essential services, training programs, and the operations our airport provides. Listening, it sounds as though adapting the Sealand flight plan may be a good way to go. I would love to see a collaborative approach that helps everyone move forward in a positive and productive way. Thank you for taking the time to hear my perspective.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Sorry, that was Mr. Roberts. Pardon me. Next, and I can't read that name. I'm going to ask Ms. Swenson if she can just figure out. Oh, that's Tom. Yes. Okay, go ahead. Come in, Tom. Yeah. No, I mean, look at it. Come on. It's a scribble. But no, now that Ms. Svensson pointed out, I can see it's you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Well, thanks very much for having everybody here. And Tunis, nice to see you back in the saddle, as it were. And I think, and I'm just kind of an observer of this. Like, I'm really not kind of hard and fast, like a core person with this issue, but I've heard a lot of talk elsewhere, like not in this room, and heard everything, of course, that's been said to here. But as a general observer, I think that there's no question at all but that airport provides tremendous economic benefit for the town of Qualicum Beach and the outlying areas, and I don't think anybody's disputing that. It was great to hear a little bit about the electric aircraft proposal. That's a great idea. What I hear on the street is people should stop complaining. They bought a house next to an airport. Well, okay, it's not like buying a house next to a forest. That doesn't really change that much, but the airport has changed drastically over a period of time. We've got helicopter training now. We've got flight training now. The flight path has changed. It sounds like there was an acceptable flight path before, the so-called Sealand route, and I think I even heard some pilots saying that that's acceptable. I guess what I don't understand is why that Sealand route, like the pre-2016 flight path, why isn't that being used? Like, is that not a solution to this? I think I also heard that Transport Canada, you folks, and maybe the residents could possibly get together and talk about a solution. It's noise. It's not the fact that there's airplanes. Got to have airplanes. They're going to fly somewhere. But where do they fly? And it's the noise factor. The 1,000-foot versus 1,500 feet, I think that's maybe there's something going on there in terms of decibels. But couldn't you guys get together with Transport Canada and, delegation of this group and kind of work this out? That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. My apologies for not reading it. I guess I'll never live that down. Next is Bruno Sturgeon. Is there? I know it says Bruno and Sturluxman.
Oh, is that me? Yes, I am Bruno.
Yeah.
Sturgeman.
Yeah. You're up.
Oh, I didn't know I had to.
Yeah, you put your name on there, or somebody put your name on there.
I guess I'll have to try to I'll be positive. I think when we talk about innovation, I live at the other end of Qualicum, and I do hear the helicopters. I do understand it's to train for learning how to get in and out of a helicopter. And they go for hours and hours. And so I was thinking, why not two possibilities? Either they go and do it outside of the biosphere, the Aerosmith biosphere, which is kind of a nice thing to have here, to be declared what do you call that? Natural biosphere by UNESCO. So that's one solution, to do it somewhere else in the middle of the forest. Or the second one would be to have a mechanized system where a crane lifts a helicopter that is static, that doesn't have the rotors going, and go up and down, and it could go for hours and hours here in Qualicum, and it wouldn't bother anyone. I mean, that's an innovative way of doing it, having a machine that lifts just like a simulation, flight simulation. And so that would be the thing. And I do get thing that bothers me, I suppose, is in terms of noise, is when planes circle around Qualicum, and I don't know where they...
Okay, I'm going to ask, I'll let you get away twice, but not 3 times. This is Qualicum Beach. Qualicum is the name of the school district.
Oh, did I say Qualicum?
3 times.
Oh, see, no, I meant to say, that's a bad habit. Sorry.
Thank you.
Qualicum Beach. So when they do circle over, top of my house, it does get annoying, and it's got nothing to do with shutting down or keeping an airport. It's got more to do with a matter of courtesy. These are pleasure flights, I understand. They're not commercial, and these are pleasure planes that circle over top of our houses. Now, I think that it would be nice if there was less of it, if they were doing it over the ocean. I'm not at all into the aviation activity, so I assume that it's just, I don't know if it's a training, but that kind of noise, and I guess when you wear hearing aids, it might get worse. It's loud, and it's just unpleasant. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Thurman. Is there anyone else in the gallery who would like to speak? Okay, then I'm going to ask staff to put up the map that would work with that recommendation, and this is for council purposes. There is, under C, it has staff recommendation, but the first 2 pieces that are on the, or should be on the screen shortly, a little bit more. It's the first page of the agenda package. And that's the map that's what we were talking about when we look at the recommendation?
Yes, Your Worship, that is the map. And if you refer to the front page of the agenda, I know staff's trying to juggle both things on this screen. There is a proposal to rescind previous resolutions and then to make recommendations related to this particular map. Thank you.
So there is. So the first 2, it talks about the council directs staff to make an application, and then further that. Those first 2, we need a motion to rescind if council feel that's appropriate, and then deal with the new motion that's underneath and further that. So could I have a motion to rescind the first 2 pieces? Mr. Harrison.
Technically, it's a recommendation to rescind.
Right. So I would like a motion to rescind, if council agrees. Okay, and a seconder? Councilor Young, discussion? All in favor? Then those 2 are seated, and then I'd like staff to explain the new motion, and that works with the map. Ms. Varela or Ms. Kalfas?
I'll defer to the airport manager, Your Worship.
Thank you, Your Worship. Could you please bring up the map? The Google, thank you. So the previous motion that was just rescinded did not consider the expansion of the Rupert Road area as an NSA. So the new recommendation now considers this area and this area. So in the previous report that staff provided to council on October the 17th, it included this area and a small area here. So since that report was provided to council, there was members of the community, more specifically the Qualicum Woods Residents Association, that put forward another proposal.
So staff looked at that, and we consulted with NAV Canada on the proposal. And this today is what you have in front of you as part of that consultation with NAV Canada. So this then is the new recommendation. So to include all of this on the north side, when I say all, again, the yellow is existing. This is all new. It would include this area, which is Aldous Road, Hemsworth Road, and Cottonwood Drive. And it would also include this expanded area that works again with this new subdivision that'll be going in as part of the Pheasant Glen subdivision. In addition to that, this is the proposed VTPC that will direct aircraft away from these higher densely populated areas, if you will, to a lower density through here. Thank you.
Thank you. So what is council's pleasure? We can, this is a committee, so it's only a recommendation to council. But Councilor Harrison, if you would like to make a motion, we'll take a motion.
I just had a couple questions
Sure,
for
go ahead.
Yeah. So when we're looking at this proposed route, one question from the discussion that was happening earlier is about 1,500 feet. Do we have the ability to discuss anything past 1,000 feet? Because I thought that was the height where basically pilots can do what they will. Or if we say it's 1,500 feet is the rule here, does that sort of supersede that? Just through the chair to Mr. Goldfuss, because I thought in earlier presentations we were told after 1,000 feet, the pilots can basically do what they want. So I just want to make sure if there's a way we could say 1,500 feet, because how sound works, sound is a logarithmic measure, and then it's an inverse square for decline, for dissipation. So if you go up higher, it's a much quieter experience on the ground. So it has a huge impact. Just wondering, can we do that is really the question.
Thank you. Mr. Goldfuss.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. There's quite a few moving parts to this. So I'd like to take council back to that an NSA and a VTPC is a recommendation, right? It's not a regulation with Transport Canada, okay? So that's really important. Secondly, when you ask if we can require an altitude such as 1,000 feet or greater, that can be published in the CFS. But again, it wouldn't be enforceable, okay? The only thing that would be enforceable when it comes to altitude, for an example, would be an NAP, a noise abatement procedure, because an NAP is a regulation. I hope that helps answer the question.
Okay. And then just my second question, and I sort of to the point where the gentleman was talking about the blanket that's too small for the bed, I think is a apt description for this. I'm not trying to be difficult when I say this, but I know that near Memorial to Berwick is a very dense patio home development with a lot of older seniors in there. And it's a lot closer now to that. And it's just sort of like, there's no good answer at the end of the day. Wherever the planes go, if we're going to say all the planes are going in one place in one direction, you're going to have a problem no matter where you go. But that's just my only concern, is that we're putting it near another area where there's a bit of density. And yeah, that's sort of as I was asking about that 1,500 feet, is that if we could do a recommendation about height, that would probably have the biggest impact on noise, not necessarily the actual flight path. Because if, just if pilots could fly a little bit higher before they turn, that would probably be the most impactful thing. But I think Mr. Goldfuss is raising his hand, and he wants to correct me on something.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it's important to note that the type of aircraft that we're talking about are typically 172 Cessnas, okay? They're a small, older piston-type aircraft. What I'd like to bring to your attention is, at this turn here, at best, those aircraft are between 400 and 500 feet above sea level. So to ask or to expect that same aircraft to be at 1,000 or 1,500 feet would actually put them somewhere around here. And I'll provide another example of that. If that same aircraft was to leave the runway, which is runway 29, and go straight out, to achieve that 1,000 feet would put them somewhere here. And this is in line with your current noise abatement procedure for turns to the south, or turns to the north, pardon me. Now, 1,500 feet is even further out, probably somewhere at your shoreline. So if you were to use this as a pendulum, so to speak, and just move this over, you're somewhere in here before that same aircraft is at 1,500 feet, and you're somewhere in here before it's at 1,000 feet, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Councillor Skipsey.
Yeah, well, I share Councillor Harrison's concern that, and the comments made that we're kind of moving the problem around. And like what I'm hearing is that it's not the day-to-day operations that seem to be the problem. It's really the circuit training that seems to cause the most angst for people, that noise pollution. So I'm wondering if there's more things that we can be looking at as far as trying to regulate or put in some different requirements like the pre-approval, or what other airports are doing, like Squamish, I hear, you know, they've been successful, or I think there was another airport referenced this evening. I am concerned a little bit too. I think some of the input from one of the pilots was, whatever we do, it belongs in the Canadian Flight Supplement, but we should do one thing and not four things, so that we're making it confusing with maybe the Good Neighbor program and noise-sensitive areas and the noise abatement procedure. And we have so many different things going on that it makes it more confusing for the pilots. So those are my concerns. There was one thing I wanted to ask staff, and that is, by changing the noise-sensitive areas, is there any concern about jeopardizing the operation of the airport? Because that was some of the wording that was used.
Okay, I'll let you think about the answer. In the meantime, we need a motion to go beyond 3 hours. So Councillor Young, Councillor Skipsey, discussion, all in favor? Thank you. We are beyond 3 hours. Go ahead. Now, you heard the question. What's the answer?
Thank you, Worship. So the question is, would an NSA or these proposed NSAs, would it jeopardize the operations of the airport? No, it wouldn't. Okay, because I think it's important. They're an NSA, they're not enforceable, right? But it's a tool that airports can use to mitigate noise over, in this case, residential areas. But it would not jeopardize the operations.
Councillor Van der Valk.
Thank you. I have probably the same concerns that have been expressed here. I think we have to be very careful when we're rerouting if we want to create a new noise abatement program. We had one fellow say, whatever we tell the pilots to do, to use, and that's what they're going to use. And that most of the complaints that have been received were not going against the noise abatement program. So I'm really having a tough time making a clear decision at this point. I would like to have more information about is there an alternative to circuit training? Somehow can we do something about the excessive circuit training? And Ms. Varela has her hand up, so I'm assuming she's going to let us know.
I yield the floor to Ms. Varela.
There we go.
Go ahead.
It was dangerous. So the noise, just for council and the public's clarity, the map before you does not propose any change to the noise abatement procedure. What it is proposing is to establish expanded noise-sensitive areas based on the input that we've had from public and council to date. And then it would also establish a circuit route. The other piece that we're looking into is the prior permission required as in Courtney Air Park, although markedly different again from the nature of Qualicum Beach's certified airport. But I just wanted to clarify that we aren't proposing in this map an amendment to the noise abatement procedure. We're proposing to expand the noise-sensitive areas and to establish the VTPC. Both of those would be, while not enforceable, would be published in the Canadian Flight Supplement to serve as a guidance for pilots.
Thank you. Councillor Young and then Councillor Harrison.
I think what I've heard so far that my fellow councillors has recognized what's been spoken tonight, but I'm really liking to stretching that blanket. Can we also hear the voice of the people that are living in a low-density area that we don't have the plane noise affecting them as, like when we're moving this flight pattern around? Is there another way that we can address it so that everyone has a relief from all this noise?
Is there an answer to that dilemma?
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Young, there really is not a qualified answer, because I think, as we've discussed and heard, is that, you know, with the blanket scenario, we are shifting, right? So when we look at this as staff, is what is the worst of two evils, so to speak, right? And we look at, you know, what can we do to mitigate and try and improve this? And it comes down to a common denominator, and that is low density.
Okay. Harrison.
I would disagree. There is an answer, and the answer is we transition to electric, to have 2 or 3 flight schools at our airport. They're all electric. One of the speakers is Mr. Smith, I was speaking to on the ferry. So he's a pilot, he works for Sealand, so that's why I was picking his brain on all things flight. And the one interesting factoid he mentioned is that the number of concurrent flights any flight school can have in operation is a function of the length of your runway, which is very small. So there's actually not a lot of flights that can do those training circuits, which is why when people are holding up the diagram saying this one guy flew over my house 12 times, the reason why it's one guy is that it's one person flying. There's not a lot of planes you can have there simultaneously. So because they'd be electric, they'd be much quieter. Because they have a lease with the town, we can set rules. And that way, what you'd want to do is it's actually the fee structure. It's not so much this, it's the fee structure where you make it very cheap to be an electric flight school, kind of expensive to be an internal combustion flight school with a lease with the town, because that still gives us some power. And if you want to visit here from the mainland, you pay through the nose. And then that way, that's how you get the best possible outcome. And then this thing is somewhat relevant, because it sort of follows our noise abatement procedure, really. It's really a function of this to some extent. Like everything in Eagle Crest and the estate properties, that's essentially a function of the NAP, if I'm correct, Mr. Goldfuss, where it says no right turns until you basically reach the water. So that's sort of baked in already. So this would be less than of an issue of how do we get the noise and the least number of people being obnoxious, and instead you're saying let's get rid of the noise altogether and work with the businesses to transition to that model. And then it's just a function of how loud are the propellers, which are much quieter. They're not perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better. So if you want the answer, it will cost, but it'd be something like having a 5 or 10 year program where you have basically like no cost lease, let's say, for a hangar, if you're doing an electric flight service. And then after 10 years, the electric flights will be ubiquitous, so you wouldn't have to have that ongoing discount. And yeah, that would just be like, just as a hint, is something to think about. But I do agree with council's, like what Councillor Van der Valk said, like, I feel like we're sentencing like 5 households to you will suffer all the airport noise for the next 5 years over your house. Whereas instead, if we say, let's try to get rid of internal combustion flight schools within 2 or 3 years, and then, yes, it's a temporary, it sucks for the next 2 or 3 years, wherever we draw the line, then we're gonna have to draw the line somewhere. But then eventually it'll be transition to something where it'll be a lot better. It won't be perfect, but it'll be a heck of a lot better. But anyways, that's sort of just, I know I'm on a soapbox here in just the sermon, but the problem is also too, we need to work with partners to ensure that they feel comfortable investing, because they're gonna have to buy a plane at the end of the day. That's a big investment. Insurance rates might be different. That's also too a consideration. They're going to have to train their staff to fly those planes and train them. It's not the same necessarily as like a Cessna. So like there's moving parts, but if you want my honest advice, that would solve all these noise issues probably forever for the flight schools. It would not address the helicopters. The helicopter noise would still be there. And the scheduled service is a scheduled service, and that's just what it is. I don't think too many people were complaining about the scheduled service, bluntly speaking, because that's like 4 flights a day, 2 or 4 flights a day. Can't remember how often Esqueo flies. So yeah, no, that's how we fix it. The problem is though, it's going to come with a price tag, and it might not need the 3-phase, but we are going to have to talk about the capacity of the grid. Recently I was talking at the Legion with a retired electrician who was talking about solar panels, and if everyone has solar panels, there's issues with transformers. So if we have a lot of electric planes at our airport, we might have to talk about grid upgrades and stuff, and that's beyond my ken. That's a BC Hydro conversation, but it is doable. Like we could probably do that within 3 years, honestly.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
I'd like to follow up on that. We did have a conversation from someone that said we could get chargers and it wasn't going to be as expensive as was quoted. So can we get a new check-in on that for cost of chargers, please?
I'm not sure if I understand your question.
We had a conversation from the gentleman tonight that said the chargers were not going to be as expensive as quoted. And so can we get a new pricing on what that gentleman was talking about? Is that possible?
I think what they were talking about was for their own private plane, but not for, they could bring it in for themselves. That's a different situation. No, sorry, Mr. Leo, I can't actually speak. Mr. Goldfuss.
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Young. Just for clarity, I recall a conversation, the young gentleman was speaking to the proposed bylaw, and that there may be some errors in the bylaw. And is that what you're referring to?
No, it was an employee of Sealand.
Yeah.
There were 2 employees of Sealand who spoke today. It was the first one. And he basically said, and sorry, I also had this conversation in the demonstration with the electric flight, with the owner, because I stuck around and talked to her afterwards, because forgive me, I've been wishing we could be an electric plane hub for a few years. And she did say they don't need 3-phase power right away. The question would be, if they're going to be doing this like multiple times a day, at a certain point, the traditional electricity will charge your batteries. It's just really a lot slower. So that's what I don't know. I don't know if like we'd solve the problem for half the day without doing the 3-phase power. And hey, half the day is a lot better than none. But yes, there was a gentleman. It's not immediately needed for 3-phase power. You can have electric planes without it, but there will be a limit ultimately. Sorry, just from what the owner of the business told me.
Thank you. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Worship. So the information that staff reported out on earlier in the presentation is staff did meet with representatives from Sealand Air and an engineering consultant retained by BC Hydro. So that engineering consultant did provide staff with a report that provides capital cost estimates and explores 2 options. If council wishes to explore additional options or those 2 further, perhaps that can be directed to the capital budget discussion, and we can take it offline and perhaps discuss is there an intermediary step towards that, but I think it really belongs at the capital budget discussion rather than tonight. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. I get the feeling that council is not quite prepared to make these motions as far as these recommendations. So what I might suggest is that you prepare through a notice of motion at the next council meeting, because if we did pass these would only be recommendations to council, and we could consider them. Or we can leave these on the table and say we'll make a new notice of motion that seem to address the concerns that council has heard about and our way of addressing them. So it's been a while. We've had a meeting this morning from, I think, 10 o'clock till 1 o'clock or something. So we've heard a lot of information, and I don't want to make an important motion like this on the fly. So please prepare your notice of motion, send it to staff, we'll circulate it, and it'll be on a future agenda as soon as we can to address these issues. Thank you. So that's what we'll do. And this is the last chance for the public. If you have any comments about what we just discussed or anything else, you may come to the microphone. Mr. Leo, you wanted to speak to this? You okay? Go ahead. Come to the microphone, please.
I just would like to say that, like your circuit training, that's the other problem with the circuit training. It doesn't climb up to any elevation. For them to save money, they like to go between 500 and 1,000 feet. So that's that continuous noise for a lot of residents. I don't have a problem. Planes fly out, they do go about their business, but the circuit training is continuously 1,000 feet, more or less, and that's where the issue is. And every time it's a takeoff and a landing. So it's just compounds. And also I'd like to say is we live on Rupert Road, which also compounds the noise. It's a busy road. So for us, it's not very good. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think most of us realize that the circuit training are the biggest source of complaints. I'm not sure who was up hands first, but I'll go with Todd.
So thank you again, and thanks to staff for all that additional information. However, I will, and thank you to council for also deferring this, because I think, as you've heard and as you realize, this is very important to a lot of people and has an impact on everybody's daily lives. So thank you for taking the time for some second sober thought, so to speak, on this. But as you repeatedly heard from Mr. Goldfuss, NSAs are not enforceable. The noise abatement procedure is enforceable. So I think you, with staff's help, with Transport Canada's help, with everybody who is a stakeholder in this game, with proper consultation, you'll get a better informed answer as to what will work. But you heard from the president of the Flying Club, I don't understand why we couldn't fly the Sealand route. Some other people mentioned the Sealand route was acceptable. There are other variations that are acceptable, and they seem to provide some temporary relief. And maybe this is something, as Councillor Harrison has mentioned, it's something we look at as sort of a short-term, mid-term, and long-term solutions. So your long-term solutions, or mid-term to long-term, are the electric. And the shorter term is how do you improve people's daily quality of life while you're working towards those longer term things. And you're not, as Mr. Sword said last meeting, good luck finding a perfect answer, because there's not. As has been mentioned, the airport's in the wrong place, for a perfect solution. So as Mr. Goldfish just mentioned, you're looking for the lesser of two evils here. But the noise abatement procedure does allow enforcement and does provide pilots, and you can ask any of the pilots here, if it's in the noise abatement procedure, they have to follow it. Just tell us what we have to do. And you also heard we don't want 4 different things going on here. And if you don't mind putting that map back up, the other major flaw with this is that following that noise sensitive area with the corridor now puts all flights directly over more than 1,200 people living in the area of Qualicum Woods, Aldous, the Evergreens. You're not helping the people that are living there and getting this impact every day. You're making it worse. All the people in Eagle Crest will be great because they won't have anything. The people on Rupert Road, great, that'll be better for them. And I don't begrudge that. That's what your goal is, to make things better for everybody. But you're not making it better for the 1,200 people living there. You're directing all the flights over us. So you've gotten the Sealand and variations of the Sealand route, which seems very acceptable to the pilot community, to the community at large. And, this concept that Councillor Harrison's mentioned is shorter and longer term goals. So I'd ask you to really consider that before you make any decisions. And, especially like even that last recommendation, not to investigate. One speaker said that, oh, well, there weren't that many noise abatement procedure complaints. Look, there are only a few. but there were 175 other complaints, and by and large, they were about noise itself. So although technically, legally, there's nothing that the airport can do, as Mr. Goldfuss has told you, I can't do anything about those other things. I can only do things about noise abatement. So you've got a staff member telling you very clearly, here's what I can help you with, here's what I can't help you or the community with. So I really encourage you to listen to Mr. Goldfuss's information there. But please take some time before you consider this corridor that's putting flights directly over 1,200 people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Provost. Mr. Whitfield.
Sure. So I agree with Todd. Okay, so I live in Qualicum Woods, and I'm down at the bottom of the hill. And so that flight path goes right directly over the height of land. And boy, I'll tell you, is it ever different from the top of the hill in Qualicum Woods to the bottom of the hill in Qualicum Woods where I live. And that flight path goes right over the top of the hill. It's thunderous. I've been over there when flights have gone over. It's like, holy mackerel, this is way different than it is where I live, down at the bottom of the hill, just to the left of that flight path. Great idea on the electric. We didn't switch to electric cars as quickly as we were supposed to. It'll happen, hopefully, with the planes, but it might take 20 years, it might take 40 years. Well, okay, 3, but I don't think so. Better to get a flight path kind of nailed down for right now, and let's cross our fingers on the electric airplanes. Thank you.
I think those are all good comments. I think one of the things that we as a town struggle with is the circuit training. If we could get a handle on it like they did in other places where they have prior approval required, perhaps that's one way for us to reduce the effect of circuit training. I've seen it, I've waited for it, and it is not right that that can continue on like that. And we can't wait for them to have electric planes to continue with the circuit training. So we need to do something short-term dealing with the circuit training, and then perhaps look at the longer-term solutions. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council, learned staff. Just as a quick small point, as with the Town of Qualicum Beach efforts to make applications for various grants to help fund the airport and its operation, I think one of the things that just came to light early in the meeting this evening that would be worth a pushback, just as you table applications for funding to a future round, I suggest that the Department of Justice has done you a great injustice in not answering your questions. And that's where you're going to get the greatest clarity about what you as a council are allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And one of the things that we have at the Canadian Air Pilots Association is a set of aviation lawyer experts that deal with these national issues with towns, cities, and so forth across Canada. And the thing that we're seeing time and time again is councils of cities and towns that are making decisions that they don't have a right to make, and they end up in a court of law, and the Supreme Court of Canada then has to correct the situation because there's a lack of education about what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. So I commend the questions having been sent last year, and I'm really sad that they were deferred because it would have really helped you do a really terrific job sooner than later. So I'm hoping that you'll go back to the Department of Justice and say, that was really not the answer we need in our community. Thank you.
As far as this is for public inputs, I'll finish that and then we'll come back to council. Anyone else? Carol, come on up. Want to speak?
Thank you. I know that these airport meetings are now held every 6 months, and I'm asking, because of the wide variety of topics tonight, that this meeting, the airport meetings, should probably be held more often, maybe quarterly or even more often, because there's so many issues that we're dealing with. I would ask if we could do that.
Thank you. Council could consider that. You're up next. You've been waving your hands a couple of times.
Draw attention to myself. Quick point on Sigmund's thing. Waiting for the DOJ to get back is probably the freest answer possible. I know it takes a little bit of patience, so that's a pretty good idea. I understand risks and liabilities because I do own and operate a business, and I don't like to bite off more than I can chew without having proper foundations of knowledge to act on. Three things rather. Circuits. So I highly encourage council to consider downstream consequences of this, specifically because Sealand does offer a night rating, and for the issuance of a night rating to operate an aircraft at night, you must do 10 takeoffs and landings for the issuance of this rating, and typically that is done by just doing repetitive circuits very quickly, and then it's done, and then you can apply for your license, your rating for the night rating. Other downstream consequences, as were previously highlighted, for the potential thought process of moving the circuit altitude to 1,500 feet above ground level, where that positions aircraft, and also the increase in length of flights now in order to accomplish the same level of experience may actually work negatively against people, because as you increase that vertical gain, there's a greater distance traveled and also a potential to squeeze in another aircraft. I know I had previously spoken to Councillor Harrison on the ferry, where I provided a piece of information provided to me from a fellow employed in the Nanaimo Flight Service Station, where they said that they minimize, and they really do aim to minimize continuous circuit traffic to one aircraft every 1,000 feet of runway. Otherwise, things get, quote, chaotic. So if you are to increase that travel distance, you allow potentially for another aircraft to slot in there, and you're also increasing the financial burden to students who do legitimately get into aviation as an alternative to college or university for employment in a skilled trade. And speaking from experience, I could not get any banks to give me loans. I couldn't use a line of credit to do my flight training. I paid for this all out of pocket after working multiple years in a variety of jobs and in the public service as well to afford my private pilot license, all the experience required for the issuance of the commercial license, as well as additional, pursuits for this. It was a burden. It took many years. So if we are going to explore this, please, I highly encourage you to explore the downstream consequence for those who cannot really afford to do this, but are using aviation as a genuine career path to a future. Finally, change.org, the petition. If you are a verified signator, and all 3,030 signatures are, you have to provide information such as your postal code and other verifiable information prior to signing the petition. And it provides the organizer of the petition that information to verify where the signatures are. That's it.
Thank you. I saw a hand in the back and then back to, oh yeah, you come ahead.
I'd just like to clear up a little bit of the reality of reporting a NAP violation, which I do quite often, and Mr. Goldfuss will verify that. In order to have the NAP violation appear up there, you have to have a genuine description of the plane. You have to have the call number. You have to have the time. It's very difficult to see the call number. They go by so fast, or if I'm inside and I go out, I can't see it. And now it isn't a regulation that they have the call number on the underside of the wing. So how can you see the number when it's on the side of the plane? And I can honestly say the 2 NAP violations that were reported were the ones that I reported, and I also report them to Transport Canada. Every NAP violation that I see, I report not only to Mr. Goldfuss, but I report it to Transport Canada, who often come back and agree with Mr. Goldfuss. And sometimes they do not agree with Mr. Goldfuss. But I'm telling you, if you are going by the number of reports there for the NAP, it's at least 50 times that. there is a horrendous disregard of this violation, of this procedure in this town. Because if they fly over my house, they are in direct violation of the NAP. And it happens all the time. The last meeting we had here during, in the summer, I counted 8 violations that day before I even got to the meeting. So I really don't think if you're looking at that data, that you use it to say, oh, well, it's not really a problem. The NAP violation is, nobody's violating it. Well, yes, indeed they are. And it's noisy. They're not going and they're not ascending to 1,000. They're turning way before 1,000. They're turning 200 feet above the house. That's loud. So I really urge you not to believe that. The system is flawed. We can't report everything because we can't see them. And I'm just one person, and I have all the technical abilities to do it with a camera, with a phone. I have many neighbors around me who are in their 80s and 90s. They can't even fill in the public inquiry form. They don't know how to do it. So it's definitely not the reality of what's happening. There's way more violations than are happening. That's enough. I won't say any more.
Thank you. Ms. Leo.
What about the taxpayers? We hear about the students and we hear about the pilots. What about the taxpayers? In 6 years, our taxes have gone up 44%. And now we have this horrendous noise. And even if I wanted to sell, how do I sell with a plane going over my house every 2 to 4 minutes? It's not saleable. You've devalued our properties, and it's not saleable.
Thank you. Anyone else from the gallery? All right. Then that section is closed. We're going to council. Councilor Harrison.
Sorry, just for Tom Whitfield's benefit, there was an article recently in the PQB News. Sealand won a national award for being the best flight school in the country. And just quoting from the PQB News article, it said, this year marks a historic milestone. So they've officially type certified the Pipistrel Velis Electro. That was the plane they flew in demonstration. And since June of last year, Sealand Flight was the first Canadian flight school to offer introductory flight training on an electric airplane. So they've been doing it in Campbell River and only Campbell River, I understand, for about a year already. So it's not 20 years out for the training specifically. And the training specifically is the problem. So that's why I say 2 or 3 years it could be done, because we're lucky enough to have the one flight school doing it almost honestly in the whole country is working out of Qualicum Beach. So that's why I say, and also to Councillor Young's point, we might not even have to do the 3-phase power. So that's why I'm just thinking we might be very, very soon. Fingers crossed.
All right. I anticipate your notices of motions to come flying in. Anyway, that basically concludes today's meeting. So thank you for attending and participating. And we will work and try and resolve these issues the best we can. There's some very good suggestions made. Staff is committed to try and make this a better place for everybody. So, Council, I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Van der Valk, all in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you and have a good evening.